Good morning, everyone. Namaskar. Thank you very much for joining today's conference on getting agricultural markets right, jointly organized by ICRIER and National Stock Exchange. I am Ritika Juneja, fellow at ICRIER, and I'm privileged to conduct the proceedings of this event. We are extremely grateful to the Honorable Minister of Agriculture, Shri Narendra Singh Tomar ji, for joining us today to inaugurate the conference. Thank you, sir, for your presence. In addition to the August gathering here, let me take this opportunity to welcome our online guests. Over 200 participants are attending the conference digitally, and we are also streaming live on YouTube. Before we start, I would like to request Mr. Pramod Bhasin, Chairman of Board of Directors, ICRIER, to give welcome remarks.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Such a pleasure to be here, and a very warm welcome and good morning, particularly to our Honorable Minister for Agriculture and Farmer Welfare. Thank you, sir, for being with us. To Vikram also over here next to me, and of course, Mr. Gulati, who leads this for ICRIER, and many distinguished guests, many distinguished speakers. It's a pleasure to be here. The purpose of the conference is quite simple: to achieve a very complex, to solve a very complex problem, to get the best price for the farmer, to help provide access to the markets, and to help reduce the risk of pricing the way it occurs in the future. These are very simple objectives, but of course, with the complexities of the markets that we have currently in India, these become extremely hard to achieve. I hope our conference and all our speakers, we have many experts here, will dwell on these subjects and be able to come up with ideas that really make an impact in this area. The government has been working very hard to try and achieve this in a variety of different ways. I'm sure many speakers here will talk about it. And with ICRIER and NSE have been doing collaborative work in this direction. Thank you, Vikram, for all the support you've given us and the fact that we have been able to work with you. That has always also been a pleasure. The concerns that we have and the criticality of this subject and topic is huge. Technology and innovation is changing the game for many other sectors across the country. And yet, I would say perhaps in this area, particularly in the agri-tech area, it just has not made enough progress. And I hope we can deliberate on why and what is the ecosystem that we can help build as we go forward. Building that ecosystem that allows us to innovate in the agricultural area, to come up with new solutions, to avoid some of the skewness that happens in the market as a result of many incentives perhaps being either not focused in the right area or perhaps being creating situations and results which are not ideal. I think those things are things that we must try and solve for. As a business person, and my background, it's a privilege to be the chairperson of ICRIER. And I hope that I can encourage everybody, and including, it would be fantastic, I think, to see if the government can somehow incentivize or encourage innovation and the introduction of technology. There are many areas that technology is changing the game today in India: healthcare, education, financial services, many others. None is more ripe for this change or needs it even more than before than the entire field of agriculture, with its impact on millions of people and the GDP overall of our nation. Thank you very much for being here. We're starting a little early. We'll look forward to a terrific conference. And with that, I'll hand it back to our moderator. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your kind words. May I now request Mr. Vikram Limaye, Managing Director and CEO, National Stock Exchange of India Limited, to give introductory remarks.
Thank you, and good morning to everyone. Honorable Minister of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare, Shri Narendra Tomar ji, Pramod, Dr. Gulati, other distinguished guests, panelists who are present here. It gives me immense pleasure today to welcome you all to the ICRIER NSE Conference on getting the agricultural markets right. The agricultural industry plays a very critical role for the Indian economy, both in terms of contribution to GDP and as a source of employment. It provides employment to nearly half of India's workforce and contributed around 19% to India's gross value added in 21-22. While the COVID-19 pandemic had badly affected most sectors, albeit with varied intensity, agriculture was the one that remained largely resilient, thanks to a slew of measures undertaken by the government on the lines of enhancing credit availability, improving investment and funding development of agricultural infrastructure. Fluctuation in agricultural produce prices has remained a perennial problem that Indian farmers grapple with. Farmers, mainly marginal and small landholders, depend on intermediaries to sell their produce. Perishable crops such as vegetables and fruits are most prone to price fluctuation and therefore require a robust post-harvest supply chain infrastructure for effective storage and marketing. Efficient and well-functioning agricultural markets are pivotal in resolving skewed incentive structures and a gradual steady move towards the goal of doubling farmers' income. Amidst the persistent inflationary pressure, it becomes even more important to focus on reforming the agri markets. The overarching agenda for today's event is to discuss issues concerning agricultural markets and getting them right for farmers. Agriculture in India is highly dependent on monsoons, and hence farmers face both production and price risk. An efficient marketing ecosystem is required to align farmers' production decisions to future prices. The first session today will be focusing on the extent to which policy and institutional reforms enable efficiency of agricultural markets in terms of price discovery and risk management. The session would also explore whether and how commodity derivatives can enable farmers, particularly smallholders, to hedge market risk and enable optimal price discovery in the spot and futures markets. In this year's budget speech, Honorable Finance Minister Srimati Nirmala Sitharamanji underlined the importance of new age technologies in improving the efficiency of agricultural operations in both pre and post-harvest space. According to a study by Ernst & Young, Indian agri-tech market is expected to grow to $24 billion by 2025. As Pramod outlined, there's a long way to go in terms of where we are versus where we need to be. The second panel discussion today will focus on agri-tech startups and FPOs working in agricultural marketing, their experience, early impact, and direction of progress through a case study approach. I'm sure the deliberations today will provide interesting insights to reform our agri markets. Once again, on behalf of NSE, I welcome you all to this conference and thank you very much for your participation.
Thank you very much, sir. I would now like to request the Honorable Minister, Shri Narendra Singh Tomar ji, to give the inaugural address.
सभी को नमस्कार। आज इस अवसर पर आप सबके मध्य उपस्थित होकर मैं बहुत ही अपने आप को प्रसन्नता से भरा हुआ महसूस कर रहा हूं। IICRIER के निदेशक डॉक्टर दीपक मिश्रा जी, विक्रम लिमय साहब, प्रोफेसर अशोक गुलाटी जी, प्रोफेसर रमेश चांद साहब, प्रमोद भसीन साहब और इस अवसर पर उपस्थित सभी प्रतिभागी और मीडिया कर्मी, मुझे जानकर बहुत प्रसन्नता है कि भारत के प्रमुख आर्थिक थिंक टैंकों में से एक ICRIER और विश्व के सबसे बड़े एक्सचेंज NSE द्वारा कृषि बाजारों का अधिकार प्राप्त करना विषय पर एक योजना की दृष्टि से विचार विमर्श करने के लिए यह सम्मेलन आयोजित किया गया है। मुझे विश्वास है कि सम्मेलन में विमर्श होगा, विद्वत जनों के विचार आएंगे और ये जो निष्कर्ष रहेंगे ये निश्चित रूप से बेहतर नीतियां बनाने में मददगार होंगे, जिससे किसानों को उनके उत्पादन का सर्वोत्तम मूल्य प्राप्त करने और अपनी आय बढ़ाने में मदद मिलेगी। हम सबके लिए निश्चित रूप से यह सौभाग्य की बात है कि भारत विविध प्रकार की जलवायु वाला देश है और खेती के लिए काफी अनुकूल मौसम की संभावना हमेशा बनी रहती है और इस कारण से भारत में विभिन्न प्रकार की फसलें पैदा होती हैं और किसानों के परिश्रम, हमारे वैज्ञानिकों का रिसर्च और किसान की हितैषी सरकारों की नीतियां, इनके परिणाम स्वरूप निश्चित रूप से आज हम ये कह सकते हैं कि कृषि उत्पादन में भारत दुनिया में या तो पहले क्रम पर खड़ा हुआ है या दूसरे क्रम पर खड़ा हुआ है। कृषि का यह जो क्षेत्र है, यह क्षेत्र भारत की अर्थव्यवस्था के लिए बैकबोन की भूमिका में हमेशा रहता है। कैसी भी प्रतिकूल परिस्थितियां हों, अगर बैकबोन ठीक है तो हम किसी भी प्रकार की परिस्थिति से समय समय पर मुकाबला कर सकते हैं। अभी हाल ही में जब कोविड का संकट आया तो सारी दुनिया थम सी गई थी और मैंने बहुत करीब से उस दौरान कोविड को भी देखा और आर्थिक गतिविधियां भी देखी और कृषि से जुड़ा रहने के कारण मुझे कृषि के क्षेत्र को भी नजदीक से देखने का अवसर मिला। इतनी प्रतिकूलता के बावजूद भी जब लॉकडाउन हुआ तो फसल कटाई के लिए खड़ी थी। किसान ने फसल कटाई का काम पूरा किया, सरकार ने खरीद का काम पूरा किया और इतना ही नहीं, इसी परिस्थिति में किसान ने अगली फसल की बुवाई वो भी गत वर्ष से अधिक की। यह सच है कि उसमें किसान को खाद मिले, बीज मिले, बाकी उसको उपकरण की उपलब्धता हो, बाकी लॉजिस्टिक के साधन हो, इन सब मामलों में सरकार की जो भूमिका रही है उसकी भी मदद किसानी के क्षेत्र को मिली है। लेकिन अगर किसान काम नहीं करता तो शायद सब कुछ होने के बाद भी हम ये परिणाम प्राप्त नहीं कर पाते। हम सब ये जानते हैं कि कृषि का क्षेत्र बड़ा व्यापक है और देश की बड़ी आबादी आजीविका के लिए कृषि के क्षेत्र पर निर्भर करती है और इसलिए समय समय पर इस क्षेत्र में जितने बदलाव की जरूरत है तो उतने बदलाव करने की दृष्टि से प्रयत्न भी हुआ, लेकिन हम लोग उस दिशा में बहुत कुछ आगे नहीं बढ़ पाए। लेकिन मुझे इस बात की प्रसन्नता है कि आप जैसे विद्वज्जन समय समय पर खेती कैसे आगे बढ़े, किसान को उसके उत्पादन का दाम कैसे मिले, उसकी आमदनी कैसे आगे बढ़े, इस मामले को लेकर चिंतित भी बने रहते हैं और हमेशा सरकार को अपने सुझाव से अवगत कराते रहते हैं। उसका फायदा निश्चित रूप से कुछ कुछ कृषि के क्षेत्र को मिलना प्रारंभ हो गया है। आज उत्पादन हमारी समस्या नहीं है, लेकिन उत्पादन के बाद का जो प्रबंधन है वो निश्चित रूप से हमारे लिए एक चुनौती है और ये प्रबंधन हम ठीक प्रकार से कर पाए, इस दिशा में प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी जी के नेतृत्व में गत 8 वर्षों में अनेक उपाय करने की कोशिश की गई है। जैसे मैं इनाम की बात करूं तो इनाम परियोजना के अंतर्गत देश की 21 राज्यों की लगभग 1000 मंडियों को जोड़ा गया है और जो शेष मंडियां हैं उनको भी जोड़ने की प्रक्रिया निरंतर जारी है। इससे निश्चित रूप से बिचौलियों की समाप्ति में थोड़ा नियंत्रण आया है और किसानों को वाजिब दाम मिल पाए और बाकी टेक्नोलॉजी का इसमें पूरा उपयोग हो पाए, इस दृष्टि से निश्चित रूप से प्रयत्न किया गया है। किसान टेक्नोलॉजी से जुड़े, इसके लिए विभिन्न योजनाएं हैं। उन योजनाओं के अंतर्गत जो लक्ष्य रहता है राज्यों का उसके अनुसार राज्य काम करते हैं। लेकिन भारत परियोजना 10,000 FPO बनाने की, जिस पर केंद्र सरकार 6,865 करोड़ रुपया खर्च कर रही है, इसका काम प्रारंभ हो गया है। और FPO बनाने का निश्चित रूप से ये फायदा होने वाला है कि देश में लगभग 85% किसान छोटे किसान की श्रेणी में है। और अगर ये FPO के माध्यम से इकट्ठा होते हैं तो निश्चित रूप से इनकी खेती का रकबा भी बढ़ेगा और इनके उत्पादन का वॉल्यूम भी बढ़ेगा। ये कहीं भी अपने इकट्ठे उत्पादन की बार्गेनिंग भी कर सकते हैं। ये इकट्ठा रहेंगे तो टेक्नोलॉजी भी इनके पास पहुंच पाएगी, अच्छा बीज, अच्छा खाद, महंगी फसलों की ओर जा पाएंगे। और साथ ही साथ अगर ये अपने उत्पादन को प्रोसेस भी करना चाहते हैं, पैकेजिंग भी करना चाहते हैं, उसकी ब्रांडिंग भी करना चाहते हैं, तो उसके लिए 2 करोड़ रुपए तक का बिना गारंटी के ऋण की व्यवस्था भी की गई है। उसके लिए भी एक और फंड बनाया गया है, जिससे कि कुल मिला के किसानों की आय बढ़े और हमारी खेती उन्नत खेती में बदले। साथ ही साथ हमें यह ध्यान देने की भी आवश्यकता है कि हमारे कृषि उत्पादन की गुणवत्ता अब ऐसी रहना चाहिए जो वैश्विक मानकों पर खरी उतरती हो। और मुझे कहते हुए प्रसन्नता है कि कृषि उत्पादों में ऑर्गेनिक खेती जो लोग कर रहे हैं उनका प्रोडक्ट बहुत अच्छा है और देश में भी उसको पसंद किया जा रहा है, दुनिया में भी उसको पसंद किया जा रहा है। पिछले दिनों काफी प्रतिकूलता के बाद 4 लाख करोड़ रुपए का लगभग निर्यात होना, ये मैं समझता हूँ कि एक अच्छा संकेत है। फसलोपरांत नुकसान से बचा जा सके और सभी प्रकार के उपकरणों की सहायता कृषि के क्षेत्र को मिल सके, इसके लिए कस्टम आयरन सेंटर की जगह जगह व्यवस्था की गई है। फार्म मैकेनाइजेशन योजना के अंतर्गत लोन आसानी से मिले और सब्सिडी भी मिले, जिससे कि छोटे किसान को भी उपकरण की सुविधा मिल सके। इस दृष्टि से भी मोदी सरकार निश्चित रूप से प्रयत्नशील है। हम सब इस बात को भलीभांति जानते हैं कि कृषि के क्षेत्र में निजी निवेश के दरवाजे प्राय बंद जैसे ही थे। कुछ लोगों ने अगर निजी निवेश किया भी तो सामान्य तौर पर कृषक को फायदा हो ये सेकेंडरी रहा, लेकिन व्यापार करने वाले लोगों के लिए इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर की उपलब्धता बने यह प्रथम उद्देश्य रहा। इसलिए चाहे वो वेयर हाउस जैसी संरचनाएं हों, चाहे पैकेजिंग ग्रेडिंग मशीनों का मामला हो, चाहे वो कोल्ड स्टोरेज जैसी संरचनाओं का मामला हो, ये सारे के सारे जो इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर हैं ये जिले के या बड़ी मंडी के आसपास ही है। और विशेष रूप से जो किसान का माल खरीदा जाता है उस माल को रखने के ही काम आते हैं। लेकिन जरूरत इस बात की है जब फसल के उपरांत जो नुकसान है उससे अगर बचना है, किसान को बचाना है, तो ये इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर गांव तक पहुंचना चाहिए। और इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर गांव तक नहीं है इसलिए किसान तो उसका उपयोग कर ही नहीं पाता। इसलिए कृषि और संबद्ध क्षेत्रों के लिए लगभग 1.5 लाख करोड़ रुपए का इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर फंड प्रावधानित किया गया है। 1 लाख करोड़ रुपया कृषि के क्षेत्र में, 15,000 करोड़ रुपया एनिमल हस्बेंड्री के लिए, 20,000 करोड़ रुपया फिशरीज के लिए, 4,000 करोड़ रुपया हर्बल खेती के लिए, 500 करोड़ रुपया मधुमक्खी पालन के लिए, 10,000 करोड़ रुपया छोटी फूड प्रोसेसिंग यूनिट के लिए। तो लगभग ये 1.5 लाख करोड़ रुपया आज उपलब्ध है, जिसका काम आगे बढ़ रहा है। और मुझे कहते हुए प्रसन्नता है कि एग्रीकल्चर इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर फंड में लगभग 9,000 करोड़ रुपए तक की परियोजनाओं को हम लोग स्वीकृत कर चुके हैं और वो शीघ्र ही मूर्त रूप लेने वाली हैं, जिससे कि निश्चित रूप से किसान को फायदा होगा। इसी दिशा में बढ़ते हुए इस बात पर भी अब बल दिया जा रहा है कि हम ऑर्गेनिक फार्मिंग की तरफ जाएं, नेचुरल फार्मिंग की तरफ जाएं, जिससे किसान की लागत भी कम हो और जो प्रोडक्ट है वो प्रोडक्ट भी स्वच्छ हो, स्वस्थ हो, जनोपयोगी हो, और विशेष रूप से जो सृष्टि की पूरकता है। आज पशुपालन को हम बढ़ावा देने की बात करते हैं, लेकिन पशुपालन बढ़े इसके लिए जो पूरकता का सिद्धांत है उस दिशा में भी काम करने की जरूरत है। अगर खेती में पशु का उपयोग नहीं होगा तो खाली दूध निकाल कर ही हम भेज देंगे तो इससे काम नहीं चलेगा। इसलिए पूरकता के सिद्धांत पर भी सरकार बल देकर आगे बढ़ने की कोशिश कर रही है। टेक्नोलॉजी की दृष्टि से आप सबके ध्यान में है कि पिछले दिनों भारत सरकार ने अपनी ड्रोन पॉलिसी घोषित कर दी है। कृषि मंत्रालय ने भी अपना SOP जारी कर दिया है। जगह जगह ड्रोन के कृषि क्षेत्र में उपयोग हो इसके लिए डेमोन्स्ट्रेशन चल रहे हैं, और मुझे लगता है कि ये ड्रोन पॉलिसी के अंतर्गत जैसे जैसे उपयोग बढ़ेगा तो कृषि के क्षेत्र में तो फायदा होगा ही, और जो फर्टिलाइजर और पेस्टिसाइड वेस्टेज होते हैं उससे भी बचत होगी। मानव शरीर पर भी जो दुष्प्रभाव होता है उससे भी बचा जा सकेगा, और साथ ही साथ ये टेक्नोलॉजी रोजगार के अवसरों को भी निश्चित रूप से सृजित करेगी। लेकिन कुल मिला के मैं ये कहना चाहता हूँ कि योजनाएं काफ़ी हैं। बैंक्स का भी पैसा किसानों के पास अब आसानी से पहुंच रहा है। लगभग KCC के माध्यम से 16 लाख करोड़ रुपए का उपयोग देश भर में किसान कर रहे हैं। प्रधानमंत्री फसल बीमा जैसी योजना के माध्यम से लगभग 1,15,000 करोड़ रुपया अभी तक जहां जहां किसानों का नुकसान हुआ है सुरक्षा कवच के रूप में किसानों को प्रदान किया गया है। लेकिन इसके बावजूद भी किसान का उत्पादकता बढ़नी चाहिए। इसके लिए और रिसर्च की आवश्यकता है, जिसमें कृषि क्षेत्र में काम करने वाले वैज्ञानिक बहुत ही जिम्मेवारी के साथ काम कर रहे हैं। ये जो आवश्यकता है, इस आवश्यकता को सरकार और बढ़ाने की दृष्टि से निरंतर कदम बढ़ा रही है, और साथ ही साथ उत्पादकता बढ़े, गुणवत्ता बढ़े और किसान को उसकी फसल का अच्छा मूल्य मिले। इसके लिए निश्चित रूप से जो बीच में शोषण और बिचौलियों की स्थिति है इससे मुक्ति दिलाना यह निश्चित रूप से आज हम सबकी जिम्मेवारी भी है और हमारे सामने चुनौती भी ये विषय बना हुआ है। और मुझे पूरा विश्वास है कि आज की ये कॉन्फ्रेंस में जो विचार विमर्श होगा इस दिशा में बहुत अच्छे निष्कर्ष आएंगे, और सरकार को भी आगे बढ़ने में आपके निष्कर्ष, आपके विचार मददगार साबित होंगे। मुझे अशोक गुलाटी जी ने इस अवसर पर आप सबके बीच अपनी बात रखने के लिए आमंत्रित किया। मैं गुलाटी साहब को भी हृदय से बहुत धन्यवाद देता हूं, और इस पूरी कॉन्फ्रेंस की सफलता के लिए अपनी ओर से बहुत बहुत शुभकामनाएं देता हूं। धन्यवाद।
Thank you very much, sir, for sharing detailed insights with of various agriculture schemes undertaken by the present government. May I now request Dr. Ashok Gulati, Infosys Chair Professor for Agriculture, ICRIER, to give vote of thanks to the Honorable Minister. I would also request him to felicitate the Honorable Minister with the symbol of fable Kalp Vriksh, the tree of bounty. I am also pleased to inform you all that 100 trees have been planted in Sikkim in the Honorable Minister's name.
आदरणीय नरेंद्र सिंह तोमर जी, पहले तो बहुत बहुत हृदय से आपका धन्यवाद कि आपने हमें अपना बहुमूल्य जो समय दिया है। मैं जानता हूं आज आपकी कैबिनेट मीटिंग है, आपने जाना है और 5 मिनट के अंदर, लेकिन जो आपने मैसेज हमें दिया है, संदेश दिया है कि हमारा किसान इस देश की रीढ़ की हड्डी है। कोविड हुआ तो भी वो खड़ा रहा और उसने वो करके दिखाया है जो शायद दुनिया के लिए एक बहुत बड़ी मिसाल है। हमारे भंडार भरे हुए हैं, हमें खाने की वो इनसिक्योरिटी नहीं है, चिंता नहीं है कि देश में उत्पादन नहीं है। लेकिन जो थोड़ी बहुत चिंता आती है किसान के लिए कि उत्पादन करने के बाद अगर ज्यादा उत्पादन कर दे और कीमत 100 रुपए की बजाय उसकी 50 रुपए पे बिके तो वहां कष्ट होता है। आप मध्य प्रदेश में थे, मुझे वो दिन भी याद हैं जिस समय इतना ज्यादा प्याज का प्रोडक्शन हुआ कि कीमतें बिल्कुल नीचे गिरनी शुरू हो जाती हैं। तो ऐसी स्थिति में कैसा एक इकोसिस्टम क्रिएट किया जाए, उसको प्रोसेसिंग से लिंक किया जाए या उसको फ्यूचर्स के साथ लिंक किया जाए, उसकी वेयर हाउस रिसीट सिस्टम किया जाए, उसका ई नैम किया जाए। सरकार ने कई तंत्र अपने यूज किए हैं कि किसान को जो वो प्रोडक्शन करता है उससे अच्छी कीमत मिल सके और वो आपने जो कहा गुणवत्ता भी रहे और जो विश्व के व्यापार में उसकी प्रतिस्पर्धा भी रहे, कॉम्पिटिटिवनेस भी रहे, ताकि हम एक्सपोर्ट कर सकें, अच्छी क्वालिटी कर सकें। लेकिन पहला काम हमारा अपने देश के लोगों को भी अच्छी गुणवत्ता की चीजें देना है। और उसी सिलसिले में हमने जो आज का कार्यक्रम रखा है, 2 सेशंस रखे गए हैं, जिसमें एक में रमेश चंद जी यहाँ हैं, जो इकोसिस्टम पूरा किस तरह से तैयार किया जाए, सरकार क्या एमएसपी के रूट से कितनी क्रॉप्स कर सकती है, कहाँ तक जा सकती है, ई नैम से क्या कर सकती है, फ्यूचर्स के ट्रेडिंग से क्या कर सकती है। और मुझे थोड़ा सा जो कहना है कि जो रिस्क मैनेजमेंट की स्ट्रेटजी है वो अभी पूरी तरह से दुरुस्त देश में नहीं है। तो जब उसको रिवार्ड देना होता है हमें, तो वो कहता है मैं ज्यादा प्रोडक्शन करता हूँ, कीमतें बहुत नीचे गिर जाती हैं, मुझे लॉस हो जाता है। तो उस स्थिति से किस तरह से उसको बचाया जाए और उसमें किस तरह की इनोवेशंस लाई जाए। टेक्नोलॉजिकल इनोवेशन हो सकती है, उसमें इंस्टीट्यूशनल इनोवेशन हो सकती है, उसमें एक्सेस टू फाइनेंस चाहिए। तो ये सारी चीजें हम डिस्कस करके जो एक्सपर्ट्स हैं यहाँ पे एक छोटा सा पॉलिसी ब्रीफ आपके सामने पेश करेंगे और उसके बाद आपसे संपर्क में रहेंगे अगर कुछ आगे का काम करना होगा। इन शब्दों के साथ मैं आपका बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद अपने ICRIER की तरफ से, NSE की तरफ से और जितने यहाँ पे उपस्थित लोग हैं उनके लिए। 1 मिनट के लिए सिर्फ रिक्वेस्ट करेंगे कि हम मूव करना है, हमें वहाँ पे जो मीडिया वाले कह रहे हैं कि फोटोग्राफ चाहिए वो पर्दे के साथ आपके साथ।
Yes, I would like to request Dr. Gulati, Mr.
बहुत
Bhasin and Mr.
एक
Limaye
सेकंड।
to please stand near the projector to take a picture. This is the Kalp Vriksha, the tree of bounty.
बहुत धन्यवाद सर, थैंक यू वेरी मच।
Thank you very much, sir, for your time. Thank you all. Well-functioning agriculture markets are critical for farmers to ensure better prices for the produce across space and time and minimize price risk. With this, we'll now move to our first session on creating an ecosystem for getting markets right for optimal price discovery and risk management. We'll take a moment here to invite the panel on the dais. Rest, please remain seated.
We need more chairs. It's coming. It's coming. No, when you sit. No, it's okay. It's just coming.
Please welcome our distinguished panelist, Professor Ramesh Chand, Member NITI Aayog, Mr. Ashish Bahuguna, Chairman and Public Interest Director, NCDEX, Dr. Purvi Mehta, Deputy Director of Global Growth and Opportunity, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Mr. Shiv Kumar, Group Head of Agri and IT Businesses, ITC, Professor Gopal Nayak from IIM Bangalore. May I now request Mr. Harshvardhan, Fellow ICRIER, to give the presentation, and Dr. Gulati will moderate this session. After that, panel will be open to the questions. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Harshvardhan, Fellow at ICRIER. And before we begin the presentation, before we begin the panel discussion, I'm going to present few slides on our ongoing project on getting agricultural markets right. First, I'll discuss the objectives and background of the study. Then I'll share some results from our ongoing study on the agricultural marketing situation in India, and the role of agricultural derivatives market, and finally the way forward. The objective of our conference is to find an ecosystem that enables the farmer three things: to get optimum price possible for their produce, to do the best price discovery across space and time, and to minimize price risk. To achieve these objectives, government has undertaken different measures. The first is minimum support price, which they announced for 23 commodities. But the issue is how many commodities they can cover, and what are the cost and what are the implications for other markets. The second is ENAM, which aims to integrate agriculture market spatially, and the futures market, which aims to integrate the agriculture markets temporally, and warehouse receipt system. To ensure above, both physical as well as digital infrastructure is required. I just mentioned that the issue is MSP coverage. So this slide shows the results from the situation assessment survey, household survey data. So it shows that only 8% of the total crop and livestock value, that includes sugarcane, is sold under MSP. If we exclude sugarcane, the value remains only 6.4%. 33.3% of households producing paddy is aware of MSP, but only 8.3% of them sold to government agencies. 30.1% of wheat producing households are aware of MSP, but only 4.9% of them sold to government agencies. In case of rice and wheat, the coverage of MSP is highest. And because of open-ended procurement by the government, the rice and wheat stocks have been increasing over time and way above the buffer stock norm in most of the years, if not all. And this heavy procurement of rice, especially in states like Punjab and Haryana, leads to depletion of water table level. The graph on the right-hand side shows Punjab has the highest water table depletion rate in the last 20 years. In case of sugarcane, India produces surplus sugar, and sugar industry is controlled by the government at all levels in the form of FRP, SAP, export subsidies, and ethanol pricing. Lower realization from sugar sale leads to arrears to cane farmers. And Government of India undertakes measures to improve the viability of sugar sector. However, India's policy on sugar and sugarcane have been complained by countries such as Australia, Brazil, and Guatemala in WTO. However, India has already lost the case. In case of cotton, Cotton Corporation of India undertakes MSP operations when market prices are lower than MSP, and they take commercial operations when market prices are more than MSP. Cotton Corporation of India is mandated to procure 25 to 30% of the production, but however, only few years this objective was achieved. This is because most of the time market prices are higher than MSP. In case of ENAM, ENAM was launched in April 2016, and the aim was to electronically integrate all APMC markets across India. Currently, 1,000 APMCs have been integrated in 21 states, and number of commodities have been included are 193. However, the actual trade on ENAM taking place is very low. Warehouse receipt systems are tech-enabled ecosystem that is transparent, and it increases the credit worthiness of farmers. The total capacity is 9.5 million tons, and more than 3,000 warehouses are registered under WDRA. Between 2011-12 to 2021, 319,000 of ENWRs were issued with stocks of 4.8 million tons, and loan sanctioned against them was rupees 31.5 billion. Agricultural derivatives market are such as futures and options are important for both price discovery and price risk management. Futures market was launched in 2003 by the Vajpayee government. However, post 2012, frequent bans and suspensions led to low volumes in both NCDEX and MCX, the largest exchanges in India. When we compare futures trade in India with China and USA, we see that China's volumes and US in terms of contract size is highest in the world. And in case of tonnage, USA volume is high. This is because of the difference in contract size. While China has contract size of 10 metric tons on an average, USA has a contract size of 120 to 130 metric tons. Since 2016, NCDEX has been promoting FPOs to participate in agri-futures trade, and around 5 commodities contribute 72% of the total traded volumes. The number of FPOs have been increasing over the time, and currently 405 FPOs are onboarded on NCDEX platform. Agricultural options market was launched by SEBI in 2016, and NCDEX started trading options contract from 2017 onwards. However, the volumes have declined over time. However, options can be an alternative to price insurance mechanism, as farmers are able to secure a price with a small premium. And if the prices increases, they can sell in open market and forego the premium paid. This way, it can be an alternative to price insurance. It can also be an alternative to MSP regime, as it guarantees a floor price for farmers, which he can take or leave. Even government can participate in option market in 2 ways. They can procure up to buffer stock norm, and any purchase beyond that can be met through selling put options to farmers. They can also be a buyer of call options, which will give them the right to buy a commodity and not an obligation during price increase. This will reduce the burden of physical procurement, storage, and distribution. Now, how to get agricultural markets right? These are some of the questions which we will pose to the panelists. So how will marketing reforms such as direct marketing, contract farming, private mandis help achieve the objectives of getting markets right? Will switching to digital governance of markets help root out hoarding and other malpractices? How to make ENAM achieve its objective of spatial integration of agricultural markets? How to develop futures market in India to achieve the objective of temporal integration? And how to use options market to address issues in MSP regime? With this, we'll look forward to the panel discussion by the distinguished speakers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Harsh, for this backdrop presentation. And I have the job of moderating this discussion, and we have a respectable time. We have started a little early, so we have 1 full hour for this. What I plan to do is have 2 rounds with the experts on the dais here. And I'll request in the first round, you can give their opening remarks, and I have some specific questions. I'll start with the government representative in a way, but his backdrop is very much academic, so hopefully he'll be open enough. Dr. Ramesh Chand, everybody knows. I'll start with him, then go to Ashish ji. Ashish ji has a background of being the agriculture secretary, but nowadays the chairman of the board of directors of NCDEX and related issues onto that. And the private business person, Shiv Kumar, who represents one of the largest agri business in the country, how he views this. And we have someone who can hopefully collect farmers, producer organizations. And she has been working a lot in India. And now with a global responsibility, whether the Indian model of FPOs and FPCs and onboarding them onto some of the new avenues of marketing, that is the purpose. And then we expect a very unbiased approach from Gopal Nayak, being the academic like me, who can hopefully speak the truth where we are, India is, and what are the potential solutions. So my first submission and question to Dr. Ramesh Chand. You know, we have seen whatever had happened over the farm laws in the country. That story is more or less over, and we need to move forward. And I don't think anyone will disagree in this room that farmers deserve the best price for their produce. And what is that best price or optimal price or more rational price for their produce? If there is a huge volatility, then the risks are too high for the farmer. And therefore, if he produces more, I gave the example of onion in Madhya Pradesh at that time when the prices had dropped to 2 rupees a kg, and then farmers protest and all that happened. When you talk to the farmers who were on the protest and all those things, they will say, some of them at least, some others say open the markets, but some say everything the government should procure. And some states have gone ahead in announcing even MSP for bananas and carrots and gobi and, you know, all these types of commodities. How far? So my question to Dr. Ramesh Chand is, please educate us. What is government thinking? How far the MSP regime can go in this direction? What is the cost of it? And as we saw in the slide, the situation assessment survey says that the MSP has benefited basically 8% of the total agriculture value of the produced crops plus livestock. So how far can we go in that direction? And in the second round, I'll come back, which is the more ticklish question, and that is whether options can in a way substitute, or your another idea of giving some sort of income insurance to the farmers, both taking care of production risk as well as market risk, the US model in a smallholder economy, can we do that? Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Gulati. First of all, I want to commend your effort to organize this debate today, because after withdrawal of 3 farm laws, you find that there is a sort of silence, rather despondence in the country, as if we have a full stop in case of reform, and now they are not going to come. I feel that thinking is very, very dangerous for agriculture, for country, for economy, and also for the farmers. If we have to make progress, reforms have to be there. So first of all, I think after withdrawal of those farm laws, this is the first kind of debate which I see is organized. So congratulations to you. The answer to some of the question require a lot of, I will say, background setting, etc. But that time is not there. So if I say certain things in a state way, don't mind that I have just sent it in a very crude and rude ways. That is just for sake of time. Dr. Gulati, you and I both have been working in this area, and even after these laws were withdrawn during the farm laws, I also have a lot of debate with the farmer leaders, though I'm part of the government, but they were regularly visiting my residence and we were discussing these things. One argument which they always made was based on the strong evidence from your research that Indian farmer is net taxed. So this narrative that Indian farmer is net taxed has always been used against reform in agriculture. So they will tell me, what is the MSP you are giving when we are net taxed? You just see throughout this argument was made. Even today, a seminar by Kisan Chamber is going on. I have to go there. Sompal Shastri ji has made a special request to me. And he is the person who forcefully argued that when Indian farmer is net taxed, you should not talk of rationalizing subsidy. You should not talk of that you are giving MSP, which is more than what will be the open market price. I think after 18, the situation has changed. Whatever search you have done up to 18, I do not want to go into that. It's a possibility that Indian farmer was net taxed up to 18. And ICRIER and OECD did a study, historically also you showed up to 18. But after 18, with change in formula for MSP, prices of most of the commodities have turned higher than what are international prices. Sugarcane prices in India are 30 to 40% higher than international prices. Wheat prices, except this year, have remained 10 to 15% higher. Rice price has remained, paddy prices marginally higher. So these are the major commodities where the prices in India, MSP, has ruled higher than what was the international price. And then we are also giving hidden and apparent subsidies, which you also know are not what we are reporting to WTO, 6% or 7%. They go beyond 10% if we fully reckon them. So if that is the case, then Indian farmer cannot be net taxed. And when we set this narrative right, that this is the situation, then I think we can do many things. That yes, he's not net taxed, but we want to maximize his income further. We don't want him to be content with this. We want that he just his prosperity improves, his income improves. So I think for this, if you accept onus lies on you to revisit whether this is true. In fact, Sachin Sharma did some study of WTO. His conclusions are different than that. But a young researcher, if you say something that has different meaning and weight in this country, than if any other researcher is saying this thing. So I am not saying that what is right, but please revisit. That will set the narrative rights, and that will create good ground for government to bring reform agenda. Now,
How far can we go in the MSP business?
yeah, I'm coming to that.
Uh-huh.
Now, coming to this MSP business, in some cases, MSP is justified because when there is a market failure and when you find that there is so much volatility in prices, so MSP is justified, it is needed. It's not that it is not needed. And it is also justified in case of glut that you need to have some sort of threshold kind of thing for MSP. I feel what matter in case of MSP is how we give MSP. If you give MSP through procurement, certainly it is distortionary. It involves huge cost. Again, latest calculation is that to give 100 rupee to farmer in the form of MSP, you need to incur 35 rupees. So 35% goes as a cost of giving MSP. That is the latest statistics. I also published that somewhere. Earlier it was 40%. Now it has reduced a little bit. So that is the kind of cost involved. But if we give MSP, the way China is giving MSP, the way USA is giving MSP, that you give it through other means. And the best other mean is deficiency price payment. In fact, Madhya Pradesh did it. Again, some of the researchers, they came out with that, but Madhya Pradesh has done is disastrous. And Madhya Pradesh was so much discouraged. The reform-minded chief minister was so much discouraged. So he discussed with me that we implemented your idea and you are not defending us. Even finance minister is not giving us money, whatever cost we incurred on deficiency price payment. So we are leaving it. I think it is not that deficiency, and that set the narrative against deficiency price payment. It is now that Haryana is pursuing it in many crops, that interest is re-emerging in a deficiency price payment. I don't know how much time I have, but my take on MSP is that MSP has to be there as long as markets are not competitive, markets are not efficient, but we need to debate that how we can give this MSP through means other than procurement.
Good.
It is the procurement which is creating problem, not giving off.
So we can come in the second round after that.
Okay.
If you have anything specific on MSP, the idea of price deficiency payment, and it needs to be tried. Otherwise, I'm getting to Ashish ji.
No, I have written on this that for price deficiency, there are ways to different type of mechanism to give this. I also made a presentation before Prime Minister comparing the cost of giving MSP through procurement and giving MSP through this deficiency.
So that would be interesting to know.
Yeah.
Roughly, what is the budget that is needed by the finance minister?
It is because the difference that depends upon what is the difference between open market price and what is MSP. When I prepared these results, the total difference between MSP and what was the open market price, taking the district level data, was not coming more than 12 or 15%.
Okay.
So if you are implementing MSP through procurement, the cost
So that's
goes
only
between
of
30 to
those
40%.
commodities which are under MSP
I
regime.
did it for all the crops. I did that for all the crops. That was the kind of cost coming. But there is a catch. If you are implementing MSP through DPP, you can't stop it that now after procuring 20 million ton, we will not do it. After procuring in Punjab and Haryana, we will not do it.
That's
Then you have to give it everywhere. And
this is why I'm concerned with the cost,
Yeah, but
because
you are
then it's
announcing
all
MSP.
India cost.
that is where equity comes.
Yep.
That if
Sure.
you are giving MSP, why it should be confined only to rice and
Sure.
wheat?
So
Yeah.
to achieve that
Yes,
equity,
yes.
what is the cost that the country has to incur?
It was based on year 1920 figure, it was coming something close to 80,000 crores.
I would be little surprised because one is which commodities, why not all commodities? Because equity is then not just for rice and wheat. It has to be across all the commodities, including perhaps the livestock commodities, milk and others. Anyway, we will. So the idea basically is MSP has to be there as an anchor, no matter how imperfect it is. Perhaps we can experiment and pilot with price deficiency payments, because the world over, actually country after country, they used to follow this, whether it was Europe or US, MSP business, and they accumulated all those stocks. So they left that regime, but they are compensating their farmers in the other way. And that is the price deficiency payments he's talking about. So that idea needs to be noted. Ashish ji, you have been in the government, faced all these things, and now you are also looking at the futures particularly. You know, I remember during Vajpayee period, when this futures was introduced, because prices after the Asian crisis had fallen, and there was a real tough challenge, and they said we should open up the markets in the best possible way. And after 2003, our graph went up. And you would see like China and India both going up. But after about 12, I think our graph has been consistently falling, whereas China is zooming. So where did we go wrong? And you having been a part of the government, why our farmer is still looking what the prices were yesterday of tomatoes, and then he plants and everybody goes in that. If yesterday's price was good, and then it creates a glut and the prices go down the bus. What are the answers and what are the challenges?
Thank you, Professor Gulati. Government generally is in the habit of talking the talk and not walking the walk. So that's the short and snappy answer to your question. But let me try and elaborate. First of all, the futures topic, the subject of futures in the government of India is not managed by the Ministry of Agriculture. So the interests of the farmers come into it only obliquely. It is the interest of consumers that is paramount, right? It is the Department of Consumer Affairs which is handling futures market, and of course, DA gets into this issue as and when prices start rising, and this is the easy. The futures are the easiest scapegoat there is for the government to try and tackle price rise. So, but let me come back to what, and I'll elaborate on futures a little bit later if you allow this, to what Ramesh ji said about the need for an MSP or an MSP equivalent. Because, again, I thought that the speech of the agriculture minister during the inaugural was rather telling. Because though the subject of this conference is on how to set the markets right, I don't think there was anything on the markets in his speech except a passing reference to ENAM. So that's telling. And I think we should kind of, try and recognize the signals coming from government. And when I say that government doesn't talk the talk, you said it's the end of story for the farm laws. There wasn't a story to begin with. Sorry, I mean, it's a bit harsh, but there wasn't ever a story to begin with, because at the slightest sign of trouble, it was the government which, without withdrawing the farm laws, actually contravened the ideology or the idea behind the farm law, especially in regard to storage of essential commodities when they imposed stock limits and so on and so forth. So who are
Export
we
ban.
trying to fool?
Mhm.
You see? And when Rameshji says that, yes, there needs to be an instrument. I don't think MSP is the right instrument, but there needs to be an instrument to ensure the best possible prices for the farmers, or let me say optimal prices for the farmers. I mean, I would think whether MSP is the right instrument to go about it. Our idea, at least, and especially when we talk such a lot about minimum government and maximum governance, is to reduce the imperfections in the market, not to introduce more imperfections in the market and then try to, address those imperfections by providing more money. That's not how to go about it. So what are the issues, or what are the features in the ecosystem which are actually depressing prices, which are not allowing farmers to reap the best prices? When government is not consistent, whether it's on trade policy, whether it's on stocking policy, whether it's even on the farm bill, I mean, what are the signals we are giving? And I'm sorry, Ramesh Chandji, I do not agree with you about this 15 to 20% difference between the differential price system between the prevailing price and the MSP, because what you have taken into account is the prevailing mandi price. You have not taken into account the prevailing prices at the farm gate, which are at least 20-25% lower, and we are far lower as you go eastwards and into the more untouchable and unreached areas of India. So I think, I think it's obvious to everybody that MSP cannot be the solution. Yes, the world over, agriculture needs support. So you probably need some kind of, what name you give it is up to you, but you need additional money to be transferred to the farmers. But more than that,
Would you suggest a sort of an income approach, which is
Absolutely.
crop neutral on a
Absolutely.
per hectare basis, rather than tinkering with the prices of different commodities? Because that is crop neutral. It doesn't create that type of distortions.
I would wholeheartedly support such an approach.
Okay.
But also, I think what we need to do is to address all the obstacles that have been put in the place of, in the marketplace.
Not allowing the markets to function.
Yes.
So
the
basically you are
imperfections have to
saying
be
is that the
removed.
future graph is coming down because of some
So-
of the
so if you
interventions of the
recall-
government.
So if you recall, Dr. Gulati, the first hit that the futures market had taken was probably in 2009 or so, when pulses were Dur and
Any price going up,
Dur and
first thing
Urad
is suspend
were,
futures.
yes. So contracts of Dur and Urad were suspended, and the government at that time, in its wisdom, constituted a committee headed by a renowned economist. I won't take his name, and the report was excellent, except for the last, I think, 2 or 3 sentences, which said, I mean, with more or less, I'm paraphrasing. However, extolling the virtues of the futures market and everything, but at the end of it, however, this is not the right time, and we must get lay our hands on. So we are responding to signals from the consumers. We are responding to signals from the media. We are responding to the middle class aspirations. When fuel prices and food prices, they're the only 2 things that matter apparently in the country. So if the press goes to town about increase in prices, government feels compelled to step in.
So I think there is a lot more of educating the general public about the benefits of what futures are, and if at all they can be, because look at where China has gone literally from nowhere. It's the largest contracts in the world.
Certainly that is there. And I think it's not only just educating the public. I mean, instead of adding more commodities to the futures basket, we seem to be withdrawing it or doing it on an inconsistent
So
basis.
we are not very predictable.
Yes, we need
Policies
to
are
have
not very
consistency in all policies and
Okay,
practices.
can I move to
Sure,
the next
sure.
one. Shiv, you are the real private sector player in the agri-food space, one of the largest, I would say. And you were one of the best innovators earlier through your eChopal system, which ultimately was being taught even at Harvard Business School. Now with the new technologies coming, that was when you had to put a dish antenna in the villages and get those. Now with the new technologies coming, what do you see is the role of technologies and other institutions that the private sector can employ for hedging not only their own price risks, but also help farmers in that game? And that model can be scaled up at the highest level, perhaps. Over to you.
Thanks, Ashok. Good morning, everyone. When it comes to markets and good part of the presentation, the concept paper, we focused on price discovery and risk management. That certainly is an important function. But when you talk of physical markets, as embedded in the query that you had, the role of physical markets is what I would call custom discovery and value maximization. The futures and options as part of price discovery and risk management function will try and standardize contracts in terms of contract size and specs and delivery points and everything else, so that price is left open. And that's what you discover through the play of the market, and you offload that risk to a larger marketplace. But when it comes to farmers and rest of the value chain players, what you're attempting to do all the time, while that function you access from the derivative market, but the heterogeneity of the consumers, the heterogeneity of the farmers is trying to get matched by the physical market. And that's what I call custom discovery as to who is the right customer for different kind of quality that different farmers produce. And then through that process, you maximize value. Now, the entire innovation of the ecosystem that must happen is try and fuse these two. The reason we didn't have so many problems in the first round after many of these instruments like MSP and everything was put in place is because we were in a production-driven supply chain economy, given the larger shortages. It achieved its objectives. We got food self-sufficiency to the extent of at least grains and at least to the people who can afford to pay, and rest of it supported by the government. But as markets evolved, as consumers became richer, as consumer diets changed, the need for diversity in terms of fruits, vegetables, milk, eggs, meat, and many other things, as also convenience in food basket in terms of what you're buying, how you're consuming, quality, hygiene, safety, all of these kind of factors essentially means that you translate those demand signals to the production system and get the production system to respond. So therefore, from a production-driven supply chain, we are in the process of transiting to a demand-responsive production system. Now, the troubles we are facing today is because we are still in transition. We are trying to manage our today's and tomorrow's needs with yesterday's instruments and institutions and laws. The farm laws, which got disbanded, or one step in that direction, certainly could have contributed as to how do we make this transition. And a little side point there, while I come back to the main narrative, is that, in much of the policy advocacy, we talk about what are the pros and virtues of a recommended system and try and keep pushing for that, whichever stakeholder you are. But I think what works in my experience is that you try and identify the cons. If you say derivatives are the panacea for all ills, contract farming is the panacea for all ills, or technology is the panacea for all ills, at each time there's a flavor of the day. Any policy advocate must think of what are the cons of what is being recommended and how to deal with them. And then you are likely to have a more resilient and more robust policy that will take shape. I think that's what happened in case of derivative markets. It's seen as an ideal solution for everything. And consequently, we had the stops and starts rather than saying if there are very clear cons of financialization of commodity markets, What are the implications for the farmers? What are the implications for the consumers? What are the implications when the market doesn't have depth? What are the role of speculators? What are the role of hedgers? Many things are there. And how do you really deal with those cons built into the, whether it is in the surveillance system, whether it is in the management, or whether it is in the policy, then you are in a position to actually have a more continuous and calibrated progress. I think that's what missed in case of farm laws, and similarly every other piece that we talked about. I mean, coming back into the narrative of where technology can play a role is that in trying to create that demand responsive production system. And then how do you translate those signals back to the farmer so that what is in demand is what is produced, and not an unlimited expectation of the demand.
Wonderful.
Which is one of the limitations of the MSP also. And today's technology, for example, if you refer to ITC eChopal, and we moved on to what is now called the ITC Mars super app as an integral part of ITC eChopal, which is in the current scale-up stage. It'll take 2-3 years to get to pan-India level, is to become a solution integrator of a host of agri-tech solutions that are there. There's some which are talking about real-time monitoring of crops and supporting the farmer in production. There's some on quality assaying, some on linking aggregation of farmers' produce into whether it is a derivative market and so on. But each of these are point solutions and can deal with one part of the farmer's problem. And farmers, it doesn't translate into more money in the hands of the farmer. So you need multiple solution integrators, and that's the role ITC Mars is playing by co-opting many of these kind of startups, creating a physical ecosystem in the form of FPOs on the ground, and then get those demand signals, response from the farmer to produce. And where derivative markets become more evolved and we are able to offload our risk, we will be in a position to assure a price pre-planting, like a forward price with options embedded, which are very common in many other OTC contracts in the financial sector. That is what is relevant in a physical market where custom discovery and value maximization has to happen. We don't need to get disheartened that farmers are not directly participating in the derivative market. It will happen to some extent, but the large part of farmer in the physical market transaction would require an embedded option into that contract that at the time of my planting, I am assured of at least this price, same as the instrument MSP, but offered by this kind of a system. And there are many traditional systems. I kind of got my foundation commodities in Gujarat. We used to have a system called Jangad system, which is exactly the same thing, that the farmers assured of a price, and if the market goes up, you'll get the higher price. Market goes down, you get identical situation MSP. And that's what options can do when that market evolves by embedding into this. I think that's the kind of a role that technology can play, both in terms of point solutions and many agri-techs which are there, as also the solution integrator like ITC Mars is playing to make the markets more demand responsive.
Great.
And the limitation of MSP, that it is not demand responsive at a micro level. It was demand responsive at a macro level in a food shortage situation.
So
I think that's a kind of an opportunity that we'll have.
So we literally get it that the policy ecosystem at present is still living with the past legacy of shortages and of a few commodities to ensure food security, and this open-ended procurement system. And that I'll come back in the second round to, Dr. Ramesh on this, whether we can create a more demand-driven system and the other commodities that have come up, especially looking at the horticulture side and animal husbandry side. The size of that is growing at 3 times faster than the cereal group. And this is where the nutrition lies. And looking at that issue and creating a demand-driven system, how do we put farmers into this? 10,000 farmer producer organizations, maybe we'll need 1 lakh or 10 lakhs farmer producer organizations that there is some institutional mechanism where the emerging demand pattern is communicated back to the farmers. Now, one was sort of a contract farming you can do, or bring some sort of a forward pricing that at which they can sell. What are the other instruments or any other global experiences that you have come across? You have been working with some FPOs in Bihar and Odisha and all that. So what is your take on that? FPOs and a demand-driven system can give them a better pricing and lower risk.
Thank you, Professor Gulati. I think whatever is the demand and what is the system demanding, right? There are three key issues that any market system demands or any production system demands. Number one is reduce transaction cost across all actors in the market. Number two is better cash flow for the farmer. Ultimately, it lands up there, right? The cash flow, which is timely and also transparent. And the third one, of course, is the farmer or the system's ability to absorb shock, whether it is the production shock or whether it is market shocks, or sometimes it can be, as Ashish was saying, sometimes it can be policy shocks. And so, basically any system or any mechanism or any way of operating that can help with these three things is something that's going to be very important. I think we often make a mistake of trying to look for one solution. Right? Is FPO the solution to answering all of these questions? Is futures the question, the answer? The derivatives is the answer? We look for one solution. I think we should not. What is important is to look for different solutions coexisting together, and the interoperability between those solutions, and sort of serving it as a package, like what Shiv also mentioned. So I think fundamentally, if we are whatever technologies or areas that can help with these three things is going to be very important. FPO, I don't see FPO as a silver bullet. I absolutely don't see FPO as a silver bullet, especially not in our kind of country where, we are talking about an extremely large types of farmers. We are talking about a very large number of commodities, all of them equally important and with equal market potentials. And so it is not. But aggregation, of course, as we all know, aggregation does bring a lot of advantages, both from a large number of input advantages and output advantages. So FPO, I think, is a great idea, but FPO should not be seen as the only solution. From an industry perspective, I see FPO as a joint venture, and I also see FPOs in India as startups. Right? It is actually a combination of these two. If one sees the present FPOs, at least 60-65% of the present FPOs are less than 2.5 years old, which means they're all very, very new. They are all in very, very establishing stage. We hardly have about 8 to 9% FPOs in this country, which are over 8 years old. And therefore, I think it's going to be very, very important to see not just ending at the formation of FPO and sort of churning those numbers, because when we look at the numbers are very, very less. If you see the total number of farmers in this country and the total number of FPO, hardly about 3% of the farmers and hardly are actually part of the FPO mechanism. And 10,000 FPO, which is a great idea, will also, of course, contribute. But again, it will only sort of address a very fraction of the number of farmers who can be part of this whole aggregation area. So I think the minister mentioned the 6,800 crores, I think, that has been allocated for FPO. How do we leverage upon that? I don't think that should be that should be just to benefit the members of the 10,000 FPO. These FPOs, how can we use them as to play that catalytic role in the farming organization, in the setup, is going to be very, very important. And therefore, I think some very fundamental questions that the FPOs are right now facing. Listen, I mean, I'm being very frank here, right? If one keeps funding an FPO and if the FPO keeps doing well, I think it's not a very big deal. If the FPO becomes self-sustained and becomes truly like a business unit, that is what is important, right? And so we've had lots of funding mechanisms in this country. I mean, a lot of people see FPO as one step above SHG movement, for example, which was predominantly a social movement, right? A very pure commercial angle to farmer organization is going to be very, very important, and a very pure sort of market orientedness is going to be very, very important, right? And so I think how do we use these FPOs as, say, for example, working capital is a huge problem for FPOs, for example, right? Today, most of the FPOs, about 70% of them are actually for working capital getting loans from NBFC. How is it different from an individual farmer, for example, right? In many ways, they also often get it at 15% or higher. So how do we help with some of those things is going to be very, very important. I pose this as a question, and Professor Chand, I know you have been very supportive of some of these things in sort of making this very, very practical and implementable. How about sort of getting private equity investments into FPOs? Treat them as business and let FPO be the B2B type mechanism and not just a farmer to business type mechanism.
I think in the next session we have one group, Sayadri, which is also into
that would be. So it would be really interesting to hear from that. And my last point on FPO and the mechanism is most of the FPOs in the country are actually single commodity FPOs. We know that the farmers depend on multiple commodities, and we know that multiple commodity is a very good risk management strategy, both for the farmers, for the FPO members, and also for the market.
Right.
And so how do we promote that? So I think there are ways and mechanisms to do that. So
well, that's great. They should be able to absorb shocks and not continuously dependent on the subsidies coming from the government. That is what reminds me, demand-driven FPOs versus supply push FPOs, just to create a target of 1,000 or 10,000 or 20,000. Some support is needed, but unless there is some purpose business demand that is coming in, and that we'll have some example of that. I do want to save some time for the second quick round rapid fire, but before that, Gopal, you had a visit even to Dalian, if you remember, long back in China, and where China is moving. This is a smallholder question. And I have visited a number of countries in this context, how best they can do. And I found one of the Indonesian examples as very good. Exactly, small clusters of farmers linked to the business, so B2B transactions. And the study that we did, it showed 30% better pricing, provided they adhere to the new grading norms and specifications and all that. So there is an improvement in the quality part that the Honorable Minister was talking about. So we have to create this institutional system. But what I find in majority of that, exception could be Vilas Shinde's Sayadri thing, but many of the farmer groups or leaders, the trust between the private business, B2B, and the farmers groups, I think somewhere that is missing or lacking. Am I right in reading that type of a thing, or anything else that you can suggest from your vast work in this area of market risk?
Well, thank you. Thank you for inviting me. Well, as far as this particular question is concerned, a lot of it is based on their own experience in the past. Today, it's very difficult for farmers to believe both private sector as well as government.
So they don't
Because
believe
I
anybody.
think we have done a lot of things with, try to do many things with the farmers. A lot of times they also associate with, us with the government, and therefore the first thing they ask is, okay, what are you going to give me? So instead of, let's say, okay, what kind of ideas or knowledge that we can sort of synthesize and see how it can be useful in their context. The first thing they would ask is, okay, you give me whatever you want and leave. That's it. So that's the, because of the, I think it's basically their experience. Experience has not been very good, both with private sector as well as the government. In fact, we did a study of Water Users Association in Maharashtra, which very clearly said that, well, Water Users Association is preferable to both government as well as private agencies. So I think that has to be changed. We have to change that. I think the way we do things with farmers has to change over a period of time. Then only I think we can build that trust. With the farmers. I think maybe the startups are one way to look at. I'm sure they have newer ideas, better ideas, and also genuine concern of helping farmers. So that's where, I would say that, as that movement takes on, most likely that, the farmers will have much better trust with the private sector in the long run. So what it needs is, when we, in our own experience, you need to be able to continuously work with farmers for many months and years. It will take at least 2 years to really establish the faith of the farmers. So then only you can build institutions like farmer producer organizations and so on, or any collectives or any aggregation, or you want to bring in grading, quality standards, educating them. All of them will happen only if you are able to continuously work. But till then, there is no returns. It's only cost. So that's why most of the private sector also don't want to get in, except maybe people like.
That's what my next question was. A quick, rapid fire.
So that's the major problem. That's the major problem in really, working with the farmers and trying to come up with the better ways of, aggregation, quality standards, and so on.
Yeah. Thanks, Shiv. If I may build on that quickly, what is the secret you have? You have been working with farmers for such a long time, and I haven't heard any major protests or any protests against ITC.
No, we had an interesting protest in 2004 by the traders.
I see.
Because of transparency, and they had shut mandis.
Yeah.
In Madhya Pradesh, and nearly 1 lakh farmers came onto the streets of Bhopal, saying that if government does something, it is not shutting down each-opal, but encouraging more corporates to do things like this, rather than the other way. So we had our share of protests.
So of a different political economy is clear that when you introduce new things, there would be some who will get disturbed.
Of a different kind. Yeah, but I think the secret really is in terms of taking a longer term view. There is a conflict if you look at a transaction by transaction. If you say that I need to make more money by extracting something out of the farmer, it works because farmer has a weaker bargaining power and it works in the short run. But if you say, if you have a longer term business engagement, how do you create a win-win? And then say that, okay, I have, like, if you build a factory, you don't expect to make profit in the year one. There is a 5-year plan, 7-year plan. Very similarly, in engagement with the farmers, whatever investments you're making, very similarly, you have a plan. And once that investment gets cleared, then you're not asked questions on a day-to-day basis. Okay, how much money have you made this quarter on this engagement? So it's as per that timeline. At the end of 5 years, we'll ask. I think that is the distinction in terms of where you're making a capital investment versus where you're making a revenue transaction with the farm.
Thanks a lot. And now to Ramesh ji, because he has a much bigger ecosystem task how to create. And this is very clear that it's not one thing, either FPOs or futures or this or that. It's a whole menu and a canvas that has to be, it's a puzzle. But as you look forward 10 years, on the marketing side, you know, we talk about a great success on the production side, but the marketing side in the policy game in the next 5 years, 10 years, where do we see some marginal correction, some going forward, some being compressed? So which are the better models and what sort of a you know, puzzle and kaleidoscope we are likely to have? And on your PSC, we will definitely take up state versus, you know, Bihar can be very different compared to Punjab.
Exactly.
So the spatial analysis of that can be done.
Actually, I think the kind of shape that markets will take, to my mind, that will be decided by what you and Ashish ji mentioned, demand-driven factors. It is already visible. If you look at the share of the crops where government intervention is not there, that is rising. The fastest growing sector of agriculture is that where there is minimum intervention by government. I've given a graph in the report of no less than Finance Commission report, intervention by government and growth rate of the subsectors.
Yeah.
The highest growth rate is in fishery sector, 10% last 8 years.
Yeah.
Hardly any government intervention except some credit and cooperative. Then come your livestock and dairy. Again, other than sporting cooperative, no MSP, no subsidy on feed, etc. so far, though there is demand for it. So that is the second. Within crop sectors, again, non-MSP crop, horticulture crops rising much faster than that. I think given this thing, what is likely to emerge is, I would like to call it Sarkari crop or Bajari crop. So you will see to it that this thing for Bajari crop, you will see a lot of innovations. Even if market law don't come, I'm seeing great interest in the corporates and already hundreds of small pockets of prosperity are emerging. Pockets of change are emerging. We don't see them like green revolution that it happens on lack of hectare, which was contiguous area. But if you sum up these small changes, ITC marts, nearly 100 startups doing the things, and you add those, it makes a big volume. In fact, by 26, 27, the value of crop, value of livestock output and fish output will be higher than what is the value of crop sectors. And within crop sector, the horticulture has already taken over
the grain,
cereal, oilseed and pulses, and the gap is going to increase. But there are still issues that if that is the case, why government is still intervening. I think we need to work with the farmers because they are, some of them, they are feel so cozy in this secure environment of MSP, etc. that if you tell them that you have two choices, you can get 8,000 or you can get 20,000, average come 14. Their choice is no, we are comfortable with 15, which is secure. So I think there that risk thing which we could not discuss adequately comes into this.
I think that's great. By the way, a similar graph was put in the Supreme Court committee, that panel report. Ritika, you recall 18 years, 19 years data that we covered. And it's exactly similar, 9% rate of growth in fisheries versus 2% growth in cereals. So it speaks. What does all mean is that no matter how imperfect the markets are, they are giving a signal at present. And the farmers are responding because those commodities are growing much faster, which are Bajari rather than Sarkari. So I think that's a good message on the table. Anything you would like to add, Ashish ji and Purvi ji, on this question? Quick one, and then we
Ashokji, just wanted to make two quick points.
Mhm.
One, of course, everybody understands the
Mhm.
value of futures and the derivatives market to address volatility issues. I'm not very sure whether there's any participation from the Ministry of Agriculture, but Professor Ramesh Chandra is with us. We have, on behalf of NCDEX, given a proposal to the Ministry of Agriculture for inclusion of put options as a price risk insurance scheme. And I think that has a lot of advantages that would probably create the least distortions in the market. And this has been hanging fire for some time. So if you agree, we'll probably pass on a copy of that scheme to you with the request to take it forward if you think it is of any value. The other is, and which I think lots of us lose sight of when we address this issue of the forwards markets, is the role it places on improvement of quality by placing premium on quality. Right now in India, the problem is that whether I produce premium agricultural products or not doesn't make much difference to my price realization, because the mandis do not have adequate systems to grade and assay and provide premium on quality produce. And this is also what hinders exports that the minister had referred to in his inaugural address.
Right.
So this entire infrastructure,
Yep.
the ecosystem that requires an infrastructure of whether it's a cold chain system or warehouses or logistics or whatever, all that kind of gets catalyzed by the growth of the derivatives market. And maybe that also, since the government is so keen on development of infrastructure, and infrastructure should not be developed for its own sake, it has to come up as a response to demand. So maybe this is something that maybe the government could also look at.
Last word of wisdom.
No, thanks. Just wanted to remind that, whatever we do here also matters there, right? And the India's wheat export ban came as a reminder. For example, on 13th May, when the decision had come here, the Chicago futures, for example, opened at 6% less. So it's just that how connected these markets are, and it's going to be very, very important to be mindful of not just our own, but the regional trade and also the international trade. And to what you mentioned about the Indonesia case, for example, one of the very important thing in Indonesia through its KKN, which is like our KVK kind of extension system, they brought futures as part of the extension system. So did China, for example. So I think markets per se needs to be brought, like Professor Chand also said, we need to take farmers along, and extension system, both conventional and non-conventional, will play a very important role in talking about markets, which we don't enough do in our extension system right now. We are very production centric in those. So.
Thank you. Ritika is giving me a hint. I need to move from here. Well, thanks a lot. Unless anybody quickly wants to do, otherwise there is that to be given. Okay, Pramod, I think, please. What we will do is all these ideas we'll put together and try to make some framework of moving forward, because this is a very rich thing, and we'll share with the panelists as well as with the Honorable Minister and anybody else. It will be on the website. They can get into it, please.
Thank you, Dr. Gulati, for an exemplary moderation. Thank you, Harsh, for an interesting presentation. Thank you, panel, for sharing valuable inputs. We'll put them together and incorporate them in a final study and policy brief. May I now request Mr. Pramod Bhasin, Chairman ICRIER, to felicitate the panelists. We are pleased to inform that 25 trees each have been planted in their names in Sikkim. Please, sir.
Some carbon sequestration is there.
Thank you very much. If I may just take, I won't take more than a minute. Thank you very much, Dr. Gulati, for a wonderful moderation, if I may say. It was a terrific, terrific debate here. And thank you very much to our panelists. What has always intrigued me as an amateur from the outside looking into this very complex issue is the issues around how do we drive more investment, private investment? How do we drive more innovation? How do we bring more technology? Why aren't there more ITCs around this world who are able to deal with these issues, as well as the complexity of the entire, of the fact that farmers form the heart of this country, their emotions, their social pressures, all of those things complicate already highly complicated subject. From ICRIER's perspective and from the perspective of, if I may say that, Vikram, from your perspective also, we want to thank you very much. This was a very rich debate and really, really appreciate your being here and giving us this time. Thank you very much. There's a moment to be given. I'll come across, I think this is for Dr. Ramesh. This is for you. I'll come around this side. Yes, sir. This is for you, I believe. Naam likha hua. Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Ashish Bahuguna.
Thank you.
Mr. Shiv Kumar. Mr. Gopal Nayak. Thank you very much, sir.
हाँ ये पीछे हाँ आ गया आओ जी सबसे पहले
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, so kind.
May I now request all of you to join for a short tea break, and we will get back here at 12:10 p.m. for our next session.
Great, sir. Thanks a lot.
Sir, always a pleasure. Yeah,
स्टडी करेंगे डिफरेंशियल फॉर्म होने को कोट कर लेते हैं कि हम तो नेट टैक्स आप कहाँ से कह रहे हो
मेरा वो बैग वहाँ पड़ा है बैग वहाँ
After the thought-provoking panel discussion, we'll keep the ball rolling and move to our second session on innovations to get markets right, role of agri-tech startups and FPOs. Please welcome our distinguished panelists for this session, Mr. Prasanna Rao, co-founder and CEO, Aayog, India's largest post-harvest platform, Mr. Emmanuel Murray, Investment Director, Caspian, Mr. Vilas Shinde, CEO and MD, Sayadri Farmers Producer Company Limited, Mr. Om Rautre, Vice President, Source Trade, will moderate the discussion, and Dr. Mansi Patke and Ms. Bhushna Karandikar, Senior Consultants at ICRIER, will give the presentation. After that, panel would take up the questions.
Thank you, Ritika, and a very good morning to everybody. We continue with the second panel for the day, and I'm very happy to present the findings of our study titled Role of Innovations in Getting Markets Right, which was undertaken by me, Manasi Patke, together with my colleague Bhushna Karandikar, under the guidance of Dr. Ashok Gulati. Now, okay, so let me quickly set the context for the study. As we've seen in the first panel, agriculture market reforms have tended to be contentious and sporadic in nature. The reasons for this, right? There's a lot of political intervention which has happened in this space. There's a federal structure between the center and the states to be thought of. Now, what is interesting to the mind is that despite the sporadic nature of market reforms which have happened, there's a force in the market which has tended to be a game changer, and that force is innovations, right? So it is innovations which kind of change markets despite whatever reforms are happening in that space, right? Now, when you look at innovations, you can think of tech innovations. These have been largely led by tech startups. You can also think of institutional innovations, for example, futures, contracts, and so on and so forth. And for both of these innovations, what we find is that it is FPOs, which are, kind of the backbone of these innovations, which offer scale for these innovations to, scale up across the country. Now, in the past 3 or 4 years, especially, we find that there's a huge amount of interest in agtech startups. The funding has been happening. And so one needs to start, you become curious about understanding the early impact of these innovations. So following are the questions that we've been asking, what has been the impact of these innovations on net incomes of the smallest stakeholder in the system, the farmer? Has his risk reduced? Are FPOs institutionally better off because of innovations? And finally, of course, we're also curious to understand what kind of policies can happen in this space. How can we strengthen the positive impact and mitigate the concerns? Now, the scoping study of the innovations ecosystem tells us that there are about 1,500 agri-tech startups, right? These function across diverse verticals ranging from data analytics, precision farming, infrastructure to supply chains. Now, supply chain is a bold structure here for the reason that this has become probably the most popular funding option, for venture capitalists. 6 out of top 10 funded agtech startups have been working in supply chains, bringing food from the farm to fork. India has a huge presence of incubators, accelerators, venture capitalists, social impact funds, which are all creating funding options for agtech startups. And the sector till date has raised about $1 billion in funding. Giving scale to these innovations, you have about 7,300 FPCs, that's companies, and a huge amount of FPOs as well, right? Now, you find that all of these farmer organizations are mostly concerned with input aggregation and input sales to their members, but there are some very interesting FPCs which you find in Maharashtra, Telangana, and Karnataka, which are market-facing FPCs. They've been involved in market activities. Now, if you kind of put together the entire ecosystem on a map, you find that there are certain hotspots of the agtech ecosystems which emerge, and these seem to be Maharashtra, Telangana, Karnataka, and of course, Delhi, which is where all of these players seem to come together, right, to form a very vibrant kind of a system. Okay, now what we really did is we studied 9 case studies for innovations, which we put into 2 buckets: tech innovation and institutional innovations. And within the tech innovations, we further studied 3 verticals, which is quality and traceability, cold storage and warehousing, and end-to-end supply chains. Within institutional innovations, we studied contract farming and futures. The methodology that we followed was really quite simple and very, very intuitive. You choose an FPO which engages with that innovation. You choose a similar FPO in the same geography, which is not privy to that innovation, conduct interviews, interviews with all of the stakeholders, and what is the difference between the treatment and the control group in terms of net incomes, in terms of risk hedging, that is positioned as the impact of this innovation, right? So I'm going to very quickly present 2 case studies to just tell you what kind of impacts we've been seeing at the grassroots. Let me firstly present a case study of Stellapps, which has been digitalizing the milk value chain, right from herd management solutions to the village societies where the milk is poured to the milk processing plant. So let's take a look at products of Stellapps. What Stellapps actually has is a herd management pedometer. It's a Fitbit for cattle, right? Now, from there on, they also have a smart AMCU, which is an automated milk collection unit. So when the farmer actually pours milk at the society, an SMS of the quality as well as the price is sent across to both the village society and the farmer, ensuring full transparency across the system. Then contract takes over. Now, contract literally traces the movement, the quality and the quantity of milk from the village society to the milk processing plant. And finally, you have MooPay, which is a digital payments platform which enables the milk union to directly make the payments to the farmers. We studied the impact of this innovation on the Bilwada Milk Union, which is a district federation of about 1,000 village societies, and what has been the impact on the village society. The first, no surprise, quality of milk is much better because the system does not allow you to pour milk below a particular quality, right? So the quality is much better. Since the village societies are providing much better milk quality to the milk processing plant, they are getting much higher levels of commissions. There is a higher trust because of transparency, and the societies are reporting higher farmer membership. Since the system allows you to know who is pouring good quality milk and who is not, the societies are now entering much more focused capacity building programs, thereby saving cost and time. There is an increased sale of feeds and supplements as well. And very, very interestingly, since the milk union is making direct payments to the farmers, there is reduced corruption at the village societies. There are reduced instances of rent seeking. And this, to my mind, really is one of the most heartwarming pictures of what that intervention has done. The women farmers at the village societies are showing you on app that they've directly received the payment which was promised to them when they had poured milk at the society. I take you now across to Andhra Pradesh to study yet another innovation by Ecozen. This is a Pune-based company which offers cold stores at farm gate. Just take a look at how decentralized a cold store option can be, the need of the times, right? The product by Ecozen is called as EcoFrost, and this is basically a solar-powered portable cold room of about 5 metric tons, which FPOs can either purchase or they can lease it in, right? We studied the impact of this innovation on a beneficiary called as the Pragati FPO at Nellore, Andhra Pradesh. Now, the story is very nice. You know, the farmers bring in the flowers. These are basically flower, the farmer members are into flowers. So they bring the flowers to an aggregation point, and the FPO now takes the flowers to the market, which is about 10 kilometers away, and it sells those flowers if and only if the price hits a particular level, like 5,000 rupees a quintal. If the price is lower than that, well, the FPO brings back the aggregated flowers and puts it in the cold store, right? And the produce is stored. You have a shelf life of three or 4 days. What is the impact? Well, the impact is interesting. On a day when the market arrivals of flowers are very, very high, the control group of farmers not privy to this solution got a price of about 2,000 rupees a quintal, but the Pragati farmer has always got a price point of about 5,000 rupees a quintal. So one, incomes have definitely risen, but more importantly, I feel that the downside risks have been controlled, right? The income volatility has been controlled, and it's doing, I think this is where the success of this innovation lies. There's yet another institutional impact that we are studying, which is that the FPO is now creating a corpus, right? And it has expansion plans. So it is now moving up in the value chain, which again, I feel is, a very exciting thing to note. You can actually see how the flowers are being stored inside the cold store. Okay, so we have 9 case studies, which I cannot present because of lack of time, but let me share some overarching observations with all of you. The first and the most important is that across verticals, across agri-tech startups, across geographies, and across FPOs, we find that the net price realization of treatment FPOs is higher than control by a minimum of about 15%, which means it's definitely leading to higher incomes at the grassroots. Access to innovation is costly. Cost increments are definitely there for those farmers who are accessing the innovation, but the revenue increment is kind of overpowering the cost increment, which is a very exciting thing to observe. Second, there is a symbiotic relationship between all players in the ecosystem. So the agri-tech startups get scale, FPOs get higher membership engagement, and farmers get higher net income. It's a win-win for everyone. We also find a very interesting trickle-down kind of an effect happening in this ecosystem. And we find that it's forward-looking farmers, it's very aggressive FPOs, market-facing FPOs, which have been the champions of this movement. They've been the first movers in this whole thing. And we are waiting to see how the trickle-down will happen. We're hoping we'll get to see that soon. The success mantra of most agtech startups seems to be that digital succeeds if and only if physical intervention is efficient. Let me give you a quick example of Ergos, which provides decentralized storage systems at villages. What Ergos did in order to coax farmers into their go downs is farmers were literally allowed to view the bags that they had kept with that go down, which was a very, very localized and you might say very simple thing, but it has helped them to succeed in a big way. We also find that startups tend to piggyback on government infrastructure, and hence it leads to efficient utilization of government infrastructure. An excellent example is that of Stellapps, right? Under the PMJDY, which is the Jan Dhan Yojana, the women farmers already had bank accounts. All that MoPay had to do is make those bank accounts smart, right? You link the milk unions to the women farmers. And finally, I'm going to talk about the gold mine, which emerges from this whole thing. And this gold mine is data, right? Clearly, the hero of the story is data. Agri-tech startups collect and generate customized data and very, very good quality data. And we believe that it is this data which will drive the next round of innovations. To give you a final example here again, Ecozen operates these remote cold rooms, right? Now they're generating tick by tick data on who operates the cold rooms, how many times is the room opened, what are the products getting stored, what is the moisture, temperature, blah, blah, blah. Now you can almost see that here is a chance to run a probit model to preemptively identify when a room might break down. Right? So they are offering much more sturdier interventions as we go through. Now, I will stop with this and I'll request Bhushana to take over and take you into some policy suggestions.
Thank you, Manasi. Thank you, everyone, for this presentation. So whatever suggestions that have emerged from the study, I would like to present. The first important part of, as earlier panelist Dr. Purvi has already mentioned, FPOs are like agri-techs, and that's what we are saying, that we need to connect them, integrate them in a big way, that FPOs and agri-tech should be connected. As you know, FPO is managed by state government, Atma, and nodal agencies, while agri-tech is done by DPPITs and incubators. So we think that some institutional mechanism to talk to each other is essential. Our second suggestion that is emerging from our study is that we need to strengthen the warehousing, and we need to strengthen warehousing and institutional credit mechanism. And this can be done in various ways. The best example is customizing fintech solutions for the FPOs. Secondly, we can also implement asset monetization program for packs and other godowns with a layer of agri-tech startups in it. Our third suggestion, as all of you know, is the standards and certifications are the trade enablers. Rolling out such standards like for India GAAP will boost the trade, it will bring in investment, and most importantly, it will scale up agri-tech as well as FPOs. So again, this will be a win-win situation for everyone. For FPOs, Shinde sir is here. Again, we thought that it's a two-tiered structure. Amul model will work out better. For rather than promoting all 10,000 in one go, maybe two-tier structure would bring better results. Another one is that to enhance FPOs in futures, we need to change some protocols or some operating things like enhancing the payment systems frequency, or bringing warehouses at the production center, decentralized warehousing at the production center. Of course, this is an early impact study. This is just the beginning, and it's very positive and encouraging. However, it is based on KIIs. So we need much more verification with primary surveys on the same. Another challenge that we faced is that, which we haven't really answered, is that our agri-techs are new avatar of Artyas, especially in supply chain. That question has to be taken forward. And another most important thing is the data gray area. And I'm not talking about data generated by agri-techs only, but all production, market, price, arrival. Who owns this data? What is the data framework that we need so that this ecosystem can be created? That's what it is. So thank you once again. And I request our panelists to take it further. This is just work in progress. I'm sure insights and experience of our panelists can take it ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Manasi. Thank you, Bhushan. I'll also thank ICRIER and NSE. The moment we entered the hall in the morning, the happiness on everyone's faces and the warmth in shaking hands. Thank you for getting us all together. And I think your presentation covers, it makes the panel and the moderation much easier because, most of the questions that you raised during the last 5 minutes is what we'll try to answer. I think most of us don't realize that if you look at the year, if you strictly go by year of founding, Agri-tech in India is now almost a decade old. Some of the bigger companies that you see them around now are completing 10 or 11 years. We are still talking about tech as if it's nascent, as if it's very new, it's yet to make an impact, but it's a 10-year-old phenomenon. So is FPOs. We don't know how FPOs will shape up, but when you put Agri-tech and FPOs together in one sentence, we also need to understand the challenges in, how revolutionary the idea of just putting them together in one sentence is. When we started, years back, FPOs and farmer communities were seen as the last bastion. Agri-tech companies saw that, a government or a corporate or a multinational will probably be the first client. Those are the deals that you're going after. Those are the deals that you thought will be, easier to close, a beautiful case study, and there'll be money to sustain. So, but now that we're talking about FPOs, and not just talking, but, as you put together the case studies, I remember 5 years back when we were putting a report together and looking for case studies, most of them were just projections. And we are reaching out to startups saying, a projection is not a case study. Send us a field picture, send us an interview of a farmer. And it was impossible to get. So we finally published the projection saying, here is how this scenario looks like. From there to sitting next to Prasanna is, is a really happy feeling. So, and I'm happy to have the panel that we have today. We'll probably cover, as we said, the broad strokes being, as you see around now, Agri-techs have become, from being the change makers or nascent change makers to $1 billion industry. Like $1 billion funding in a sector like this is huge. On the other side, we are seeing FPOs. So what we started from is the tech sector. How do we transfer the money back to the farmers? So that's, I guess we'll talk about the money with Emmanuel. We don't have a VC player on the panel, but I think we'll have to cover for them. And then we have the one who implements the change. I think there are multiple stakeholders who implement this. It can be a government, it can be a a multilateral like a World Bank, it can be a MNC, it can be also a Agri-tech startup. I would like to set that context that the tech implementer is not just a startup, there are multiple stakeholders. So, but the implementation challenges for the startup, I think Prasanna, happy to have your views on that. And then the poster boy of, for lack of a better word, what we will try to understand is, what are you doing right? Is there a model that others haven't found or discovered yet? And what are the mechanisms of that model? But let's talk money first. Emmanuel, if I can start with you. We are talking about $1 billion and big money, but you have been an advocate of small capital. So what do you mean by the small capital? What is the potential for that impact? And what are the changes that you would like to see?
Yeah, so thanks so much for having me on the panel, and Mansi for inviting. I think a lot of money has chased ideas that can be quickly grown, and people are in a hurry to see that transformation happen. And in that process, there have been distortions in what requires attention versus where capital is flowing into. And what we would see as Caspian, as somebody who's looking at impact, is issues like labor shortage in agriculture during peak seasons, peak operation seasons in harvesting or in transplanting, and technologies that solve that problem. Second is mechanization to reduce both drudgery in agriculture as well as the feminization of agriculture. So machinery that can be more easily used by women. Another is in terms of resource uses, land and water, and these uses efficiently on the ground. Can we have technologies that solve that problem? Third would be closer to farm preliminary processing of agricultural produce. So I think lack of grading is leading to all kinds of quality moving through the market, adding transport cost, loss of organic matter, trash collections at urban centers. All these are issues that can be resolved if we have close to farm gate pre-processing of agricultural produce. So these are some areas that we believe require less capital, but can be transformative for agriculture. And that is where I think, fortunately, right now we've also set up a fund that is going to put money behind our thoughts. And that I think will make some difference in practically being able to do what we think is important in the agri space.
Okay, Panavat. I'll probably come back with follow-up questions later. So, Prasanna, I mean, I guess you have been, now that we are on the matter of money, but also on impact, you have received funding yourself. You have also passed down some of that money, most of that money to farmers in different ways. So I'll start talking about, also the model, because not agri-tech startups have a similar model. They're not, most of them don't probably have the kind of presence that you have on ground. So, tell us about first, how do you channel that money? What is the model that you're following? And second, being on ground, what is the change that you have to bring in that model to be effective?
Sure. Thank you, Om, and thanks ICRIER and the entire team here for inviting us here. In fact, one leading thing that really drew us into this business or into this area was solving for two very basic questions. One was around providing an option to the farmer at the farm gate on deciding on when to sell her produce. And second was to whom to sell that produce. So I thought, when we were sort of thinking about our own business models, we left our sort of professional careers when we started out in this whole business. These were two questions that were really driving us. And which is where we said, we can't just go out and say that we're going to reinvent everything. We're going to create a panacea of some sort of a silver bullet which will solve its problems, and which brought us to this whole idea of how do we leverage on the local wisdom that is available in agriculture in rural India, and on top of that, layer the skills of the professionals that we are. And this is what Dr. Kurian said, that India's time in the sun would come when there is a partnership between the wisdom of the rural people and the skills of its professionals. I think what agri-tech, I mean, we never knew this term when we started out about 9 years ago, but what it really brought in was specifically this layering, and which is what it does even today. And when we spoke about these two issues, we just said that there is a certain temporal arbitrage in commodity prices being in the here and now of the farmer. That there is a farmer, the produce is always going to be there. It may be a little less, it may be a little more, it may be impacted by weather vagaries or others, but the produce will always be there. That's an asset that the farmer has. Now, what do we do to make sure that we enable these two and answer these two very, very basic questions as we come about it? So, which is how the whole business model really works, to say at the farm gate, how do we ensure the farmer decides when to sell? Immediately after harvest, the prices are the lowest. We all know, the farmer knows that in about a few months, the prices move up. Now, what is required there is an option to store and not to sell. Now, if we have to do that in a country like India, we have infrastructure that exists. Without making it sound very, very complicated, if you have to store soybean, if you have to store castor, if you have to store other hardy commodities, which most of the commodities are, you don't need a very, very scientific, complicated structure. All you need is probably 4 walls which can secure the commodity from rain, water, etc., sunlight, and the rest. So can we leverage that local infrastructure that exists at the farm gate, closest to the farm gate, to be able to ensure that they decide when to sell? Now, the moment we say store, embedding finance is extremely important. And to say that if I tell a farmer not to sell her produce today and to hold it a few months, she can't do it if she does not have access to working capital or cash flows. And which is where embedding finance made absolute sense. And without that, we could never have reached where we are. So okay, we said, let's collaborate with banks. We found that challenging. We said, let's embed an NBFC into our own business model to be able to lend to farmers the moment they store their produce. So which is where you said, it's within you where you can see it. And the moment you store it, you get your money so that you can take a decision to sell it later. And then we came to the next questions, is to say, give them the option to decide whom to sell to. Now, when after 4 months, the farmer wants to sell, that local Aditya has already disowned her. He would say, "Tab to tumne humko diya nahi, abhi main kharidunga nahi." So then, which is where you say, who do they sell to? And which is where we said, there is an ecosystem. There are buyers, there are companies, there are corporates, there are small millers, large millers who need produce to be supplied to them throughout the year. A miller needs the produce to be there throughout the year. And by ensuring that the produce was stored at one point, you also had greater visibility to that produce, what quality it is, what variety it is. So you could then accordingly go out and match supply and demand better. And which is where you said that, yes, we store the produce, we finance against it, we find demand, appropriate demand for it, and then layer other trading, financing structures to cater to that demand and supply match, and which is what ICRIER is all about. So today, what we do is basically be at the farm gate, solve for these 2 questions as we go about, and there to ensure that it is an ecosystem that sort of comes together. I think the last panel brought about it, saying it's not a single solution. It can't be a single solution. There are banks who are the most efficient lenders. We don't have to be, the NBFC that comes and says that we will be lending at 14% and still want to continue doing that because we want to build our business. There is a bank which can lend at 10%. A bank can lend at 8%. They need a vehicle. I think, which is this layer that Agri-techs really, provide, to say that there is this local resource that is available on the ground. There are all of these ecosystem players, much larger players, ITC, Cargill's, you have Britannia's, Olam's, all of these entities, bigger millers. But all they need is a layer of trust that connects the 2 ends, and which is where I think the role of the Agri-techs are, and which is what ICRIER also tries to do.
Thank you, Prasanna. I think we'll talk about the middle layer. You use 2 words, the middle layer and the professional layer. So I think we'll come back to question that, are farmers unprofessional? Is the tech or the professional, are we bringing professionalism into the ecosystem? And I also want to look at, what Bhushan has said, have we become the Adhityas? By become the middle layer, have we also become the middlemen? right? But we'll probably, I'll go to Vilas to answer that question. I think Prasanna said the tech side of how we are impacting the farmer communities. How much of that tech did you use? I mean, I will not just say tech because I mean, most of this is not exactly digital or technology, but if I say modernization, even if it's a solar dryer, it's still a tech. So what did Sahyadri do to become Sahyadri today? And how do you go forward from here?
Thank you, Om. Also, thank you to Gulati sir, Manse madam, for inviting me on this platform. I think as a Sahyadri, the main difference compared to other FPC is we from the beginning understand the importance of the ecosystem. In the last panel discussion also, 2-3 speakers, they specifically mentioned that one solution or one change will not going to make an impact. It is a complete ecosystem. So that is really going to change the overall impact on the farmer's income. We are dealing with horticulture crops, grapes, tomato, also other fruits and vegetables grown in Nasik. And in all horticulture crops, we know that there is no MSP, there is no government support like wheat, rice, or sugarcane. So, so all these farmers are having their own risk. They are struggling with multiple issues. Climate change is becoming the major challenge. And the market risk is the most, I think, is the biggest issue with horticulture crops because of the perishable nature and seasonal nature. Prices are continuously fluctuating. As Gulati sir mentioned about the onion case. In that case, I remember, sir, in MP, that was a July month, 2 rupees was the onion price, and government offer 8 rupees per kg for the onion farmer, and they spend more than 400 crores. And in the next month, in September, I think they sold onion at 4 rupees, and they made almost 50% loss. And in the next month, in October, onion prices went to 20 rupees. So government agency also, they did not understand what is the price is coming in next month and how to handle that stock. So the situation is with all players, whether it is a small farmer or whether it is a government, to create a ecosystem which will have the, which can give the assurance about the optimum price to the farmer and also secure his cost of production. So at Sahyadri, we took the challenge that we have to work on these two basic our objective, that our farming at individual farmers level should be a profitable venture. If it is profitable, then we can say it can become a sustainable. And then it should happen in all circumstances, whatever the circumstances, whether it is a market related challenges or any other challenges on climate side or any production, surplus production related challenges. So we try to create a complete ecosystem, end-to-end solutions, because the loss is happening because of the multiple reasons. It's not one reason. And if you want to make profitable venture, you have to solve all the challenges. You have to work on all the challenges with the equal focus. It is not just one area you will focus. If you see most of the FPCs currently, they are working on some specific challenges. Most of the FPCs are just focusing on the agri input related issues or production related some issues, extension activities or productivity quality improvement. And very few are working in post-service related issues. And market side, definitely that is the one big challenge for the farmer producer company with the small structure. Ramesh Chan sir just mentioned about 2 different crops, Bazari crop and Sarkari crop. I think if you see the most of the innovations or most of all the FPC, that all initiatives are in Bazari crops, not in Sarkari crop. You will not find any Agri-tech startup working in wheat or rice or sugarcane or any producer company in wheat, rice, sugarcane. So in these crops, all the Bazari crops, I think farmers and the technocrats, they understand that they have to create a new ecosystem which will solve the problems with the traditional ecosystem. So but Sahyadri took that approach in the 2011 itself, because Sahyadri is promoted by the farmer. It is not promoted through any government program or as a central government program or any state government or any NGO initiative. It is purely a farmer initiative. I personally did my first 20 years as a grape farmer, and also spent my full life in the initial period after graduation as a full-time farmer. And that gave me the clear understanding what are the challenges as an individual farmer. Also the ecosystem in Nasik, as you are aware that it is actually the grape ecosystem particularly is building last 60 years effort with the 3 generations of grape farmers. So continuous innovation, also the continuous development on the production side, market development side, that has happening last few years with the farmers initiative. We know that grape is the main crop in horticulture sector, which is exported from India. In total food export, grape is having almost more than 50% share. And that is the trade is mainly with the Europe market, the market which is expecting the standard, also comparing our grapes with all the competitors like South Africa, Chile. So in that market, our farmers has got succeed, and that is purely with the farmers their own initiative. Government's role is very limited. APEDA's role, or if you see the state government's role, is limited. So that happens because of the mindset. Main difference is the mindset. In innovative mindset, entrepreneur mindset, that has created a difference in Nasik and also with Sahyadri.
Thank you, Vikas. Few facts. I think what he said about the Agri-tech startups being mostly present in Bazari crops is true. Also because, I mean, I guess when a tech company looks at implementation, it needs to look at profitability. I mean, how soon can you reach it? And also the implementation agency, do they have the people and the wherewithal to implement the technology on a sustained manner? I mean, not just do a POC and then the project dies. That doesn't work for anyone. So I'll kind of, try to bring you in back again, and also Mansi and Bhusana. He talked about exports, right? Because, and I personally have worked a lot in spices, organic cotton, etc. And there is a reason why we see higher tech adoption and success rates in cash crops or export crops. My question is, did you use any kind of, I'll again refrain from using the word tech, but any kind of modernization to access that global market? And my question to you will be, are there any structural changes or reforms that we need to do? And can technology be a game changer there?
So, I'm going to start my comment with something that you asked Mr. Shinde as well, that what is it that Sahyadri does? And why don't we find multiple Sahyadris in India? And my reading of this is that, that there is a rather non-replicable success factor there, which is the local leadership. And, you cannot really vouch for the fact that all leaders will necessarily be benign leaders. They will always look at strengthening the weakest of the farmers in their FPOs. When you look at tech, hence, so connecting your question now, when you look at tech, I really feel that currently what Agri-tech has been doing is it has been linking FPOs to the markets. It's been linking FPOs to warehousing, FPOs to finance, which is great. And we finding few success stories there. I think that where we need to head now is to move from FPO to market. That's one level, but now we need to move at an intra FPO level, and also make sure that tech is used so that the smallest of the farmers in that FPO also benefits from the capacity that is being provided at the FPO. I'm going to give you one example so that this doesn't sound too exotic. There are many FPOs which are given CHCs, right? You've got customized hiring centers, you've got tractors, you've got harvesters, which the FPO owns. There is a very slim harvesting window. The question is, who gets to use the harvester in that slim harvesting window in that FPO? There are 300 members and there's one harvester. Who uses the harvester? It's probably going to be the strongest of the members inside that FPO. How can I use tech so that there is an equitable, I'm not even saying equal, but equitable, there's an equal opportunity that everybody gets to hire that harvester. The most vulnerable woman farmer gets access to that. So I think if tech can now move from, I mean, currently it's at markets to FPO, but if it can go inside the FPO structure, I think it really has got very exciting potential to change the game for FPOs.
I'm just adding to what Manasi is saying and also taking it from Shinde sir. It's basically, I believe that the farmer to farmer knowledge, specifically of the grape with all Draksha Bagadar Sangha and all, they are so passionate and they are so much engaged in the agriculture production that grape is the only commodity that is at the international productivity level, table grapes. So having the same, so this is take, right? That they have adopted the best technology. Shinde sir has imported the varieties and all. So what I feel is that use of take at the production and taking it through post-harvest and linking it to newer markets will be the game changer in that. And hence maybe two-tier kind of a FPO structure would help in that Shinde sir's FPO working on the marketing, brand building, while the other are focused on production. And believe me, even in production, there's a lot of take that has to happen. So that might be the answer.
I think if you see the technology is making change from both sides. It is not just from the farmer side. There is a view from the consumer side also. If you see the consumer in today's market, he's the really king. He's having multiple options for every commodity. And he's looking for the better and better product from the food safety angle, also from the health perspective, and also the product at base price. So he's always looking for such product. So as a farmer, how we can actually attract the customer? I think that is the one big concern, and that we can solve with the technology. If you see the at grapes, the change happened, and the market has grown up by 4 times in last 10 years, specifically in export market. That is because of the introduction of the TraceNet system by APEDA in 2004. So actually that gave a very big confidence to the European supermarket that though there are small farmers who are growing grapes, but still it is coming with one standard, with one system. So that create a big confidence with the customer in Europe. At Sahyadri, we understand that this factor from the beginning, and we actually in the 2012 itself, our first second year, we started working with different technology companies. In the initial period, we worked with TCS. Then after that, new startups like Cropin, Kisan. There are multiple startups who work with Sahyadri, and now we have our own technology, some interventions. And in that, we kept this view that know your food should be our strategy. We should give assurance to the customer, whether it is a European customer or our Indian customer, whether he's from Nasik or Mumbai or from Delhi or from Europe. But he is having the right to know about his food, about his how the food is grown, how it is handled, how it is stored, and also the food safety factor. So we put a lot of effort on that part. We invested on that part. And actually that gave us a very good strength, that the confidence building at the customer level, whether it is a retail direct end consumer or also our B2B customer. So I think, and this is actually a real difference technology can bring in the overall ecosystem to create a strong ecosystem which has trust from the customer side and also from the farmer side. But their actually intention is also important. How you want to use technology, whether it is for just making money by replacing the existing stakeholder, or really you want to create a value for all the stakeholders, specifically for farmer and consumer.
And you're also reversing the table by becoming the first farmer community to invest in tech companies, right? So how will be, I mean, question to both of you. How will your approach be different from, let's say, a VC fund or debt fund? I mean, no matter what the term.
To me first.
you can go first. I mean, we'd like to learn about your approach. And then what I want to, also for the follow-up question to you was, is the current tech funding scenario geared towards meeting these requirements? Or is Sahyadri filling a critical gap which the traditional funders cannot meet? Right. So we can start with you. Yeah.
We saw in the presentation, there are more than 1,500 startups and almost 7,000 plus FPCs. And in that one number is from investor side, $1 billion plus investment has happened in agri-tech companies. So all this investment is actually came in the agri-tech startup companies. Not a single rupee came in farmer producer company structure. All the farmer producer companies, they have capital in the form of subsidy or grant from the government. And the agri-tech, they don't have any subsidy from the government. But the market capital, in that we have completely different situation. Not a single rupee is coming in FPC structure. Everything is going agri-tech companies. And everybody knows that both are equally important. So both are going to play important role in changing the ecosystem. The farmer, who is the main stakeholder, along with the technocrat, as Prasanna told, that the expertise and the talent should come in the agriculture sector. That is the wisdom kept by Dr. Kurian. And third is the capital, which is also important. And the capital should be in a free way. It should not come in restricted way. So I think there is some gap, and in the policy reform side, we need to think on that part, how we can have the equal opportunities for the FPC also, like the startup to access the market capital. So in Sahyadri, actually, we try to solve that problem. And because of that, we are in a different position. In the first phase, we try to create capital from the member itself, by giving them confidence that this FPC is not any NGO initiative or by any, it is not required for the any other stakeholder. It is our own need. We have to solve our problem. And for that, we need to put capital from our side. If as a grape farmer, I am putting 5 lakh rupees capital for production, then why I should not put 10,000 rupees for solving the post-harvest and market problems? So this is basic logic. The capital is not an issue. Capital is already with me, but I am utilizing that capital only for some specific area, just for the production area purpose. Post-harvest and marketing is also equally important area where I need to have control. And so definitely that problem I could not solve on individual basis. Production I can do on individual basis, but on post-harvest and marketing side, it's very difficult to create any solution on individual level. So you need to come together. You need a collective for a post-harvest and marketing type solutions, and there you need to invest. So as a farmer, you are not just like a supplier in the FPC, you are also investor in the FPC. So you need to think from that angle, and that works well in the first 5 years period from 2013 to 2017. Every year, we try to create at least 5 crore capital, considering our requirement in the future for the post-harvest purpose challenges or the market side challenges. And in the recent phase, as Madam told that we encourage other FPCs also to become the part of Sahyadri with with the same approach. Just last year, we promoted 12 FPC in Nasik, and in every FPC we kept same view that as a 500 members, you are having around 1,000 acre area, and that 1,000 acre area is having 10,000 ton production.
But if I just stick to the because the question was on funding. If I just stick to the funding side, I mean, just I want to compare. Like,
so I'm coming to the just coming to that point only. So the first way is to create a capital from the member, and that actually happens in the right direction. Just recently, every FPC, every FPC has created 1 crore capital within 1 month. Just within 1 month, sir. Just last July, we promoted that thought in our other farmers in Nasik area, and 12 FPCs were created, and with 1 crore capital at every FPC, with the 10,000 rupees contribution per acre from one farmer. If the farmer is having 4 acre, he put 40,000 rupees. One farmer, if he is having 1 acre, he put 10,000 rupees. So like that, capital has built from the member in with this thought that this is going in right direction. We are solving our problems. And in the second phase, now we just recently restructure our organization. As a APC, definitely legally it's not possible to take capital from the open market. Only farmer can become a shareholder in APC. So that problem also we solved with our restructuring. Just recently we did a restructuring. Our business, pre-harvest and post-harvest business, that we demerged in two companies. Our producer company is handling pre-harvest, and the post-harvest business has shifted to our 100% subsidiary post-harvest company. And in that company now it is open to get the market access. And recently, last month, we closed our first round also. So I think this approach is possible. And if the government also took this approach, that how APC can get access to the market capital, definitely we'll see the big difference in coming year.
So, Emmanuel, if you want to come in with your points.
Oh, yeah. So investors are keen to put capital into FPCs, actually. There are legislative restrictions on that. And the way to solve that is to establish a hybrid private limited company owned by FPOs. And that could be a middle path that opens opportunities. On the other side also, there is debt capital, which is under discussed. So a lot of startups require capital to take their solutions to scale. Ecos and Stella Apps, all of these. And growth can happen with debt funding, which we provide. There are very few providers of debt in this country at the moment. We are one of them. And we believe that can happen. On the FPO side, again, I think as a director on Napkisan, we've funded close to 2,000 crore to more than 450 FPOs at a very reasonable rate, and I think can match any bank. So capital as a limitation is a good discussion in conferences, but there are other issues also that need to be addressed.
Thank you, Emmanuel. So I just have one question for Prasanna, and then we open for audience questions. We have 6 minutes to go. Emmanuel has been talking about the small capital, and you talked about the small tech. So, in conferences, when we talk agri-tech, we say, big data, blockchain. But when you're going to the implementation side, the tech really changes. So what's your view on how much tech you are using? How much is it critical to bring that change? And how should we define that digital tech on ground?
At least in our limited experience, what we've seen is, who is this tech for? So if you're looking at farmers, the tech needs to be simple. It needs to solve for their very basic problem. So for example, I think Purvi in the last panel mentioned, what is it that can be done which could absorb the farmers from, say, shocks? Shock could be a price shock, for example. That's something that we've seen across. So at ICRIER, we said, okay, FPOs, farmers are unable to access, say, derivative exchanges, the other kind of sophisticated products that are available. Is there something that we could do to say, we use some very basic analytics tools to analyze price risk in very specific commodities in which that FPOs deal in? And one look at that told us that if we were to look at, say, commodity prices in a basket of over 5 or 6 commodities, prices in a given year have never fallen for more than 2 commodities, which means that there is a natural hedge that exists in commodity prices. This may fail in a particular year, but at an overall level, it exists. Now, is this deep tech? It is not. What it means is there are these small innovations which are possible. What we do today, we've been doing this for now about 4 years, where we've implemented this for about 50 FPOs, and we've not had a single claim. We've made a price risk mitigation model to say, FPOs may deal with one commodity, but as an aggregator, as a service provider, we are dealing with multiple FPOs with these 5 or 6 commodities. We could manage that price risk. And accordingly say that we give a guarantee to the FPO that if you store at the time of harvest, when the prices are at the lowest, we will guarantee you that particular price. If there is a price fall, you will get that differential as a payout. And what this helps do is to say that
FPOs at least try these market-led models. When we started out, we would not get even a single FPO to come in and participate in storage. Even though we would struggle to get a bank to come in and lend, they would get convinced, the FPO would not get convinced because they would say, I store and the price falls. It's a double whammy. So, which is where I think these small innovations are extremely important. And similarly, when we talk about, say, technology, we have a shortage of warehouses at the farm gate. Now, what is the solution? We can't go out and construct warehouses. There needs to be a capital investment to be done. There are technologies available globally, which are, say, hermetic storage structures, which are you could just, these are on-demand structures, set them up in 48 hours. They can store the commodity for over 3 years. These are 300-ton structures. You could set them up, store it for 5 months, 6 months, move them to another location. So there are these innovations, smaller innovations, which are available. Now, this is from the farmer's perspective. Now, there is a buyer as well. In all of this, it's extremely important to figure in markets with what we do at the farm gate. So the buyer needs transparency, for which you need maybe a blockchain. So if you confuse that to say, I will develop blockchain which will go to the farmer, may not be today, maybe it is still premature, but to an ITC, to a Cargill, to an OLAM, this would make sense, saying, okay, there is this data which is available on production practices, on what is the origin, what is the traceability of the entire supply chain, and then build it on the blockchain, give access of that to the buyer, because the buyer has relevance for it. So I think as an agri-tech, what we truly believe is we need to be very clear as to what technology we are talking about. We call it small tech, large tech, deep tech, etc., etc. But it is about the relevance of that technology to the ecosystem player that you're talking about.
Thank you, Prasanna. I think you can't blame me. We had an amazing panel. We had the report. I wished we had spent more time on discussing the report, but you can't blame me for finishing with a one minute to go. So any questions if you're taking audience questions? Yes, sir, please. And if you can also say who the question is for.
Yeah, my name is Mohan Bajikar. I have dealt with all these things earlier before many times. I want to only give you two examples that will help in future direction in this. Both the ladies have made excellent presentation. All of us, you have made excellent presentation. No doubt about that. Sir, in Taiwan, I spent quite a few times in Taiwan, 2 months. I did a land reforms course there. In Taiwan, prices are announced in every village morning and evening, morning at 8 o'clock and evening. So the farmer is able to sell wherever he wants, number one. Number two, in Netherlands, there is a company which is owned by farmers, and they have, it's a $200 million company, and they have share capital in 200 companies. How has this been happening? Why can't it happen in India? If we are talking about FPOs, nobody has, until now, nobody pays any attention to the FPOs. I spent 2 years now in doing a major project now, which is about to start up. Why haven't we paid any attention to the farmers? Basic question is, you see those farmers who made agitation recently, 1 year, 2 years, 750 people died, farmers died. They were just about half a kilometer from my house. So you can see feel the pain of it.
I hope it's an easy question.
It's an interesting question. That's what I can say. Well, thanks to the panel, a great thing for me to digest, and the real examples that Vilasji has given, Emmanuel and Prasanna. Prasanna, my little question to you. You are doing the matchmaking job, demand and supply, and in between. Now, whether we call the middle layer or middlemen or middle women, my question is that this requires time matching. Buy immediately after the harvest and then release gradually depending upon what the supply. So it's a temporal phenomenon, maybe within a year, 6 months, whatever. What is the interest rate you are paying on the working capital? Because that is where I have been finding FPOs, anyone I talk to, they get from microfinance institutions and all that 18%, 20%, 24% rate of interest. Now, can you make that feasible? That means the price has to go at least 24% to recover your working, interest on the working capital. So I had been battling with NABARD and RBI and others that if we give for crop loans at 7% and 4%, why the marketing gets at 15%, 20%, 30%? Why can't we get that at 5%, 7%, 8%? The moment we get that, perhaps it can be a game changer in streamlining the arrivals with the demand pattern. So if you have a take on that or any other advice, it will be most useful. Thank you.
Absolutely, sir. I mean, in fact, this is very, very visible from the fact that if you look at pre-harvest finance, we're talking about 17 lakh crores, which is the outstanding book. If you look at post-harvest finance, we're talking about 40,000 crores. So that itself tells you about what is the focus which has been laid on post-harvest activities there. As you very rightly said, in fact, Mr. Murray also mentioned, if you look at lending to FPOs today, there are only probably 4 players which contribute to more than 90% of all lending that happens to FPOs, and none of them are banks. So these are NBFCs in whatever form which give those loans. The loans that these NBFCs receive from banks are at commercial rates, which in fact, because we are NBFCs post IL&FS, our cost of borrowings went up drastically and the money really dried up. So what we today as a company, we offer loans to FPOs at about 12.5 to 13%. Banks can offer this at about sub 10%. So we are looking at structures where we could co-lend, we could have different kind of structures to do that. Only request that we have been really putting up to various entities, people, including the RBI, is that at least classify those loans which are given to NBFCs for PSL purposes. Today, I can stand up and say all the loans that we give, we as an NBFC that we have internally, we have a book of 500 crores. We disburse about, say, 1,000 crores. Now, all of that is something that I could stand up and very clearly say is all PSL. But my cost of borrowing is, after a lot of struggle, is still at about 12%. And if I lend at 13% or 13.5%, because we can do that only because I have other avenues of income. There is storage from which we earn. So we say, okay, we cross-subsidize for lending. As you rightly said, if you look at any price movement in commodities, the price at the time of harvest to the peak price in about, say, 4 months to 6 months, depending on what crop we are talking about, there is a 15 to 20, 25% kind of a temporal arbitrage. If the storage happens for 6 months and the cost of borrowing is 13%, when we say to the FPOs, the FPO spends about 6.5% for finance cost, close to about 1 to 1.5% for storage costs. There is a handling loss, a moisture loss, etc. that happens when you store commodities, which is another 1.5%. So we're saying that 9 to 10% is the cost that the depositor incurs to be able to achieve this benefit. And the more that we are able to suppress these costs, and the highest being the financing cost. So which is where you're absolutely right. So we've been really struggling. We've been talking to entities saying that at least distinguish. This is exactly what you want out of PSL from banks, for which you have all sorts of SOPs and also, the penalties that are there. When an NBFC is trying to do that, why can't that same NBFC get that same benefit?
Very good.
So at Napkisan, we are lending to FPOs at 8.5% at the moment.
I just want to share our experience on working capital side. As a export company, because we started our activity with the Europe market from the beginning. So we got working capital access in the form of PCFC. So we are using working capital with 2% to 3% interest rate from the beginning. With the hedging cost also, it is coming between 6 to 7%. And that gave very good strength to Sahyadri to build the business in export market and also in the next phase in domestic market. Because after the particular balance sheet level, then banks started giving us different options. And because of the negotiation power, we are now in position to get working capital at 7%, maximum 7%. All our working capital is below 7%. So I think that strength is definitely is giving a boost to overall development. But that should happen from the beginning. Most of the FPCs are struggling in the initial phase, and the interest burden that is making more difficult situation for them.
So, my question is primarily to Ashish sir and Ashok sir. Similar to I am Abhishek Bhatt, Senior General Manager from National Institute for Smart Government, and we are trying to pilot one project of credit rating framework for SHGs. So maybe something similar like credit rating framework for FPOs. If that is also undertaken, then the whole lending cost may go down. So right now the missing link which we see, because this is a pilot study that we did in Jharkhand. So credit rating framework for FPOs may help in reducing the overall lending costs. So I just wanted to hear your views on this, sir. Thank you.
So just to respond, we have developed multiple models. There is an NABARD model. There's a model that we have developed, put it out in public domain. There are other, you can have a look at those. So we need to minimize the parameters, not have too many, and it should be able to predict successfully. So there's quite a bit of work on that.
Yep. So we'll not keep anyone from lunch.
Sure.
Handing it over.
Agri-tech startups in getting markets right for farmers. I would also like to thank the panel for sharing valuable inputs. We'll incorporate these comments in our ongoing study and policy brief. I would now like to request Dr. Tirthankar Patnaik, Chief Economist, National Stock Exchange, to felicitate the panelists. Yes, yes, also take a group photo. Yes, ma'am.
Ladies and gentlemen. I think chair. Names to announce.
Mr. Prasanna Rao. Mr. Emmanuel Murray. Mr. Vilas Shinde. Thank you, everyone. And Mr. Om Rautre. Ma'am, you also please. Ms. Bhushna Karandikar. And Dr. Mansi. Thank you, everyone. I would like to request Mr. Patnaik to please stay here and give the vote of thanks.
Thank you, Ritika. Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me immense pleasure to propose the vote of thanks on behalf of NSE and ICRIER to each and everyone whose contribution has made this event a success. First of all, we are extremely grateful to ICRIER for collaborating with us in this conference. I personally thank Dr. Ashok Gulati for all his support and cooperation in organizing today's event. Thank you, sir. Our heartfelt gratitude to Shri Narendra Singh Tomar ji, the Honorable Minister of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare, for his thought-provoking keynote address. Thank you, sir, for taking the time out on your busy schedule for joining us today. It doesn't, thank you to all our panelists for graciously accepting our invitation to participate in today's debates. Your incisive views and comments have made this discussion truly engaging and stimulating. A special thanks to all our speakers for your interesting insights from your studies. Some of them were shocking, honestly, to me. Yeah, thank you. Thanks to our audience for attending the conference today, both offline and online. It has been our pleasure to host you as our guests. Last but not the least, I truly appreciate the support and cooperation we've received from all the colleagues at NSE. Thank you guys, including our Managing Director and CEO Vikram. And of course, the ICRIER team. Thank you. Once again, thank you all for being with us today. You're going to invite them for lunch. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Patnaik, for your kind words. With this, we now move towards our closing ceremony. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. May I now request everyone to please join for lunch. Thank you.